Chapter 17:01. In an instant, crimson tentacles shot out from under the cloak. As the crimson tentacles danced, even the golden light emitted by the Birth Providence string above the hall was completely overshadowed. A smell of filth and deathly stillness made Ingzhu err at the side. He stretched lazily, intoxicated and enjoying himself. After a long while, the filthy and deathly stillness finally disappeared from the hall. The long string of fate diagrams hanging from the chandelier emitted a golden light again. The hall became dazzling again. He watched as Crimson Page's coffin closed. Ingzhu's hands caressed the two dolls on her neck as she spoke. Before I fell asleep, I clearly had more than 10 dolls. But those old fogies from the epic temple destroyed all my dolls. Damn it, only a small revival was left. Now that I'm awake, after 3,000 years, it's time for the black candle in the world to light up again. At this moment, a man with a face full of righteousness appeared in the Spirit Food Pavilion again. It could be said that the Radiance Federation's people's gazes were now focused on the Radiance Federation. They were all focused on the battle between the team led by the Radiance Envoy, Lord Lu Yifan, and the Freedom Federation's Envoy team. The Spirit Food Pavilion was full of customers, and there was no place to sit. Many people from well-to-do families would choose to book a table in the Spirit Food Pavilion for the past 3 consecutive days of the 100-sequence assessment. After logging out of the Star Web, he could order food from the Spirit Food Pavilion at any time to fill his stomach. Then, the competition continued. The time in the Star Web was comparable to the time in reality. 1 second passed in the Star Web, and 1 second passed in reality. Therefore, the Star Web retained the ability to sense hunger in the body. This was the only way to ensure that there would be no accidents when people logged into the Star Web. The situation was tense. The Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission was currently deciding which 2 of His Holiness disciples they should call. There was also an intense discussion on the interstellar web. But no matter how they discussed, they didn't come to any conclusion. This was because the Star Web netizens did not know the strength of Zhongzhe, Gulang, and He. Even Zhongzhe, Gulang, and He, and the others did not know what their main phase were. They didn't even have a concept of their positions in the team. Naturally, there was nothing to discuss. On the contrary, Lu Jie and Xiaqing were discussed the most. However, there were many people on Star Web who admired Lu Jie. However, most people weren't optimistic about Lu Jie's chances in the upcoming match. This was because Lu Jie's combat style was too mediocre. He only used one main Fey to control the insect Sea to fight. If he were to face someone who was as strong as him, he might have a chance to fight. However, Lu Jie would be at a disadvantage against Feys with wide-range attacks. Just like black, the yellow sand that rose up from the ground, and the ever-expanding sea of flowers. They were all Lu Jie's nemesis. But even if the audience held their breath and watched. However, the waiters and managers of the Spirit Food Pavilion were not allowed to log on to the Star Web during working hours. Therefore, these stewards hurriedly went forward to serve this burly man with a face full of righteousness. A few of the attendants had quite an impression of this righteous man. The middle-aged man with a face full of righteousness ordered a few dishes. Then, he drank the strong liquor in his glass, as if he was waiting for something. He kept fiddling with the phone in his hand. The man with a face full of righteousness that the attendants saw was 6-Page Lashing, who had been hiding in Feng Ro's house during this period of time. For 4 days, Feng Ro didn't come to the Spirit Food Pavilion again. This made the attendants in the Spirit Food Pavilion feel very strange. Feng Ro usually relied on her large inheritance and her status as a Class 2 Creation Master. Therefore, she treated the Spirit Food Pavilion as a cafeteria. Usually, the Spirit Food Pavilion was the main place to hunt for women. Even if she found a partner, Feng Ro would still eat 2 meals in the Spirit Food Pavilion as usual. However, Feng Ro hadn't appeared for 4 days, which was really abnormal. Now, the middle-aged man that Feng Ro had taken away had come to the Spirit Food Pavilion again, but Feng Ro wasn't with him. The eyes of the Spirit Food Pavilion's attendants lit up with a strong gossipy light. This man couldn't have been abandoned by Feng Ro, right? They had seen how much Feng Ro liked this man, but they didn't expect that he wouldn't even last 7 days. He was really good-looking, but useless. At this moment, Six-Page Lashing's phone suddenly rang. Sixth Page Whip snapped his fingers, and a layer of invisible spirit chi enveloped an area of about 3 centimeters around his body. This shield could guarantee that no matter who Six-Page Lashing was talking to, no one would be able to sense it. As soon as he picked up the phone, he heard a gentle female voice on the other end of the phone. Ashua, you didn't act according to the agreement with Second Page Revival. The tower cannon must have discovered something. This trip to Radiance is considered an important operation for the tower cannon. Your non-cooperation made it very difficult to continue this operation. Your mission to infiltrate the tower cannon was to find out the secret of the tower cannon. Although that secret hasn't been found out, the captain has decided to let you come back first. If anything happens to you, our team will lose one of our main attackers, said Yongling, the rest of the team, and I will be sad. Hearing the content from the other end of the phone, Six-Page Lashing frowned and fell into deep thought. Six-Page Lashing couldn't remember how long it had been since he heard someone call him Ashua. This title was really too old. It was so old that Six-Page Lashing couldn't remember it anymore. However, the captain's decision was one thing, and what Six-Page Lashing should do was another. The organization was afraid that he would be sacrificed, but Six-Page Lashing always felt that there was a big problem with Second Page Revival. Therefore, Six-Page Lashing didn't cooperate with Second Page Revival. To put it bluntly, he wanted to use this opportunity to find out what exactly Second Page Revival was. The other 7 pages of the tower cannon were all resources that couldn't be used. Why could Second Page Revival take all of them out just like that? There had to be some reason behind it. What the Six-Page Whip needed to do now was to verify this point. It could be considered an explanation for him infiltrating the tower cannon for more than 40 years. Thinking of this, Six-Page Lashing said to the woman on the other end of the phone, Shikai, don't call me Ashua next time. Call me by my team's code name, Treasure Sword 4. Otherwise, my heart will be in a mess. After I find out Second Page Revival's specific identity, I will return to the team. After saying that, Six-Page Lashing hung up without hesitation. He then took out a Star Web card. A normal person's Star Web card would have their signature on the back. However, the one in Six-Page Lashing's hand didn't. Any Spirit Chi professional would obtain a second Star Web card after becoming a Creation Master. They would obtain a second Star Web card, 7017K. Chapter 1702. However, not everyone was willing to separate their identities. Therefore, in most cases, a Creation Master's second Star Web card wouldn't be used or activated. The Star Web card in Six-Page Whip's hands was obtained from Feng Ro. However, when he thought of the information about the Radiance Federation Star Web that the Pagoda Encyclopedia had collected, he felt that something was off. In the end, Six-Page's flogging didn't take the risk and log into the Star Web. After all, the Star Web was constructed by 3 sacred source life forms. To the 3 owners of the sacred source life forms, as long as they did not set up restrictions on each other, the Star Web would not be a secret to them. If you were to log into the Star Web now, you might be detected by the other party. You might as well whip 6 pages and wait here. The second page of Renaissance said that the 4 horsemen would come. In that case, he might as well whip the 6-page and wait for the 4 horsemen to arrive before revealing himself. Thinking of this, Six-Page's Whip frowned. This was because the 6-page whipping reminded him of a few days ago when the second page of Revival was called the Crimson Page that came out of nowhere. He addressed her as Lord Scarlet Page. However, he had never addressed the Page of Fate in such a manner. Within the protective shield enveloped by the Mountain River Set Bells, an important weapon that stabilized the nation, Chinyu pretended to think for a while and said directly, I heard that Chef Supreme was once the Radiance Federation's #1 Class 5 Creation Master. I think Chef Supreme's disciple must have extraordinary strength. For the first person, why don't I choose Chef Supreme's disciple? I want to see what's so special about Chef Supreme's disciple. As for the second place, I'll choose the Radiance 100 Sequences #1 disciple. We chose first but not third. We hope to have a friendly match with the Radiance Federation with sincerity. Qian Yu's words sounded nice, but the Huiyao clan's high lords knew what was going on. It was no secret that Zhongzhe was infected by misfortune. During the royal court assembly, Supreme Chef had specifically mentioned it. It was thanks to the joint efforts of all the majesties that the curse of misfortune was stopped when Zhongzhe was young, allowing him to keep his life. It could be said that Qian Yu's words were extremely shameless. It was obvious that he wanted to drag the weakest person off the stage. After all, the information that Lu Jie and Xia Qing had publicly revealed had been collected by the Freedom Federation. According to the public information, Xia Qing was stronger than Lu Jie. In a 5 versus 5 match, positional warfare had a lot of limitations. Unless everyone else cooperated with Lu Jie. If the formation changed, then the previous arrangements would be completely ineffective and everything would be for naught. Only Supreme Chef knew that Zhongzhe had used astrologer Jitan's pollen. The other High Lords did not know about it. Night-leaning Moon had never publicly announced how many insect species carcinoma phase Lu Jie had contracted. He had also contracted the source-type cocoon demon embryo, which could allow the insect-type carcinoma phase to break through to a higher level. Thus, the other majesties couldn't help but feel a little nervous. If he lost this battle, it would be broadcasted to the entire star web. Huiyao's momentum would suffer a heavy blow. Now that the world was in turmoil, he had to use a real battle to let the people of the Radiant sect know that he was a powerful force. The importance of preparing for war. Huiyao had never been a sore loser. However, this was a match where they could only win and not lose. As for what would happen if they lost, no one was willing to think about it. Moreover, whoever's disciple would feel heartache. The Moon Empress, Night-leaning Moon, simply couldn't watch her disciple die. Even the cicada cry, which had always been inflexible, changed its tune when Gao Feng encountered a true crisis. Could he really not do anything? At this critical juncture, Lu Jie and Zhongzhe, who had been chosen, smiled. What Lu Jie needed the most was a chance to be by Lin Yuan's side in times of trouble. Now, in this life-or-death duel with Radiant's Glory was about to begin. He was fortunate enough to be on the field and follow beside Lin Yuan. It was equivalent to fulfilling the two beliefs of the first and second half of Lu Jie's life. Zhongzhe and Lu Jie shared the same thoughts. Putting aside the fact that Zhongzhe's strength had increased, there was a huge change compared to before. Zhongzhe regarded Lin Yuan as his best friend and hoped to defend the Radiant's Glory's glory together with him. On the faces of He, Gulang, and Xia Qing, all of them were visibly dispirited. Zhongzhe and Lu Jie glanced at each other before jumping down from the golden stone pillar. Lin Yuan, Li Nao, Zhang Ziheo, and the others were a total of 800 sequence members ranked 91st to 98th. They also used various means to come to the ground from the silver stone pillar. They walked toward the back of Lu Yifan, who was already standing at the forefront of the Radiance candidates formation. Lin Yuan, Gao Feng, Lu Jie, and Zhongzhe's expressions were as usual. However, Li Nao, Zhang Ziheo, and the other 600 sequence members, they all knew that this was a battle that had to be cleansed with blood. Their strength was not even worth mentioning in this battle. The 6 of them might not even be able to defeat Black, who was ranked 91st in the 100 sequence. Moreover, the opponent's third-ranked Freedom Envoy had personally entered the field. It was obvious that there were 3 favored members of the Freedom Federation. If they were to enter the field, it was very likely that they would be beheaded in less than 5 minutes. It could be said that this was the moment that Li Nao, Zhang Ziheo, and the other geniuses were closest to death since they were born. However, the 6 of them, who were already upholding the Radiant's glory, did not have the slightest intention to retreat. They knew that they were no match, but their eyes burned with a fierce fighting spirit. Even if they were to die, their backs could not be bent. He had to die a worthy death and die a worthy death. Yinlin's gaze was fixed on Lin Yuan. It could be said that the Radiant's Glory's current advantage was that they had one more disciple than the Freedom Federation. However, Yinlin was still worried. The information that Lin Yuan knew was all provided by her. As for the Freedom Federation, they had yet to cooperate with him. Even if they really wanted to cooperate, would they be able to tell him everything? Lu Wenchang saw that the people from both countries had arrived. Each of them had a Federation envoy at the front, followed by 10 people. He was about to announce the official start of the match. At this moment, Li Su, who had not expressed his opinion, stepped forward and said, "This friendly match has gathered so many elites from both sides. Why don't we make the match more formal?" According to the format of the 10,000 Nations Conference, the match will be divided into 3 general executions and 1 group battle. What do you all think? As the Freedom Federation's Majesty, Li Su had taken the initiative to propose the format of the match before the match. The Radiant's Glory side had no reason to reject it. Once they rejected it, it would be equivalent to weakening their morale. However, it was different from the group battle. The general executions had a high requirement for the individual's comprehensive strength. They had to be able to hold a general on the battlefield. 7017K. Chapter 1703. The rules of the general slaying battle were relatively complicated. It was also the duel between the 2 major federations during the Myriad States Conference. It was even more important than the team battle. The general slaying battle was divided into 3 rounds. The first round was a 3 versus 3 duel. Each side would send out 3 people for the duel. Among these 3 people, one had to be the general. During the entire duel, the other 2 people had to ensure that their side's general would not be killed by the opponent. Apart from a general, 2 people from both sides were either severely injured or dead. The general could decide whether to continue the duel or not. For the second duel, the first general would remain the same. A new member would be sent out for a 2 versus 2 duel. The duel would be the same as the first duel. Either one would win by killing the opponent's general, or the general would voluntarily admit defeat. The third duel would be a 1 versus 1 duel with the first general. During the duel, it would only be considered the end if the opponent was killed or one side admitted defeat. According to the rules, the general slaying battle would be a best of 3 duels. However, to determine the winner of the general slaying battle with a best of 3 duels, there was a precondition. That was, the appointed commander must not die. Once the general of either side was killed, the side that died would be the loser. To put it bluntly, the established general had to be an all-around spirit chi professional. Generally speaking, an all-around spirit chi professional was better than a single-type spirit chi professional. Their abilities would be more average. However, in the general slaying battle, they would be able to achieve a surprising effect. This was because the general of the general slaying battle would be in the 3 duels. It was impossible to recover, unless one or one's teammates had the means to recover. However, once a healing-type spirit chi professional or a support-type spirit chi professional was sent out to recover, the team's combat power would be reduced. The team's combat power would be reduced when there were only a few people. If the general slaying battle was held, it would be an extremely difficult decision to determine who would be the general. Including the general, there would be a total of 4 people participating in the 3 general slaying battles. According to the rules of the Myriad States Conference, the 3 members who participated in the general beheading battle were not allowed to participate in the subsequent battles. The winning side's general could join the subsequent team battles. In other words, the general slaying battle required an all-around general to pave the way for the subsequent team battles. The Radiance faction's best choice was to send Lu Yifan to participate in the general execution battle. However, Lu Yifan was the 3rd-ranked Radiance envoy. If he were to participate in the general execution battle as the main general, the Radiance envoy would not be able to defeat him. Firstly, it would definitely cause Qian Yu to make a move. Secondly, Lu Yifan was not an all-round spirit chi professional. It was not suitable for him to participate in the general execution battle. The reason why the Freedom Federation's Emperor, Li Su, proposed the general execution battle was precisely because of this point. However, apart from Lu Yifan, how should he choose the other famous generals of the Radiance Empire? In the 3 battles, the general had to control his own spiritual energy consumption as much as possible. This was to ensure that he would be able to fight his opponent one-on-one in the 3rd round. It was not to the extent that the opponent still had a lot of spiritual energy but his side's spiritual energy had already been exhausted, and he would lose without fighting. Before Lu Wensheng could say anything, the old man sitting in the middle of the golden pillar looked in Lu Yifan's direction. He glanced at the younger generation behind Lu Yifan and said, "Hui Yao has no reason to reject such a request." Behind a radiant sacred hall is a 10,000 square kilometer training area. Establish an island to compete for the assembly of 10,000 states. The terrain is very comprehensive. It's the most suitable place to carry out battles and team battles. After hearing the words of the old man, sitting in the middle of the golden pillar, Li Su said, "I was afraid that the Radiance Federation would choose to host the friendly match on Star Web. Actual combat can better reflect a Spirit Chi professional's combat character. Because being able to support life and death and not being able to support life and death are two completely different feelings. Although it's a friendly match, in the end, attacks are blind. If anyone gets injured during the battle, I hope that the Radiance sect won't mind." At that moment, Li Su had accepted the general execution battle and the team battle on the Radiant side. He no longer hid his fangs. The bullet screen comments on Star Web had completely slowed down. Everyone held their breaths and silently cheered Hui Yao on in their hearts. The Freedom Federation's envoys and the Radiance Federation side had also started to carry out simple tactical research. Lu Yifan looked at Lu Jie, Gao Feng, Lin Yuan, and Zhong Zhe. In the end, he looked at Lin Yuan and said, "Don't worry. Among the four of you, is there anyone who can shoulder the responsibility of being the general in the general execution battle? If none of you want to go, I'll participate in the general execution battle." As the Radiance Federation's third envoy, Lu Yifan had experienced several general execution battles. He understood the pressure that the general would endure in the general execution battle. Therefore, Lu Yifan first asked for everyone's opinion and then expressed that he could take the initiative to shoulder the responsibility of the general. Honestly speaking, Lu Yifan's choice was completely for the sake of Zhong Zhe, Lu Jie, Lin Yuan, and Gao Feng. Firstly, the general execution battle was too dangerous, and it was easy to become a dead soul in the battle. Secondly, the four of them had no experience in the general execution battle and did not understand how to control the Spirit Chi in the first two matches. Every year in the Myriad Nations Conference, the Federation would guarantee victory in the general execution battle. They would concede the first two matches. They would rather sacrifice 3 members to ensure that the general was in a state of complete victory. In the third match, they would strive to kill the opponent's general and win. This was because there was no way to concede defeat in the third match between the generals. Under normal circumstances, in the general execution battle between the two major federations, one of the generals would definitely die. Lu Jie's goal was to protect Lin Yuan, so he did not step forward. Zhong Zhe pondered for a moment and felt that his combat style was mainly based on high burst. This combat style was suitable for being the main attacker, but it was not suitable for being the general. It was needless to say for Gao Feng. It was impossible for a soft support to survive being besieged by 3 of them. As for Li Nao, Zhang Zhehao, and the others, although they had become Radiance 100 sequence members, they did not even have a Diamond/Fantasy breed Fae. There was no difference between entering the stage and delivering themselves up. Just as Lu Yifan was preparing to enter the stage himself, Black, who was wearing a silver mask, stepped forward and said, "I can be the commander. As long as I'm alive, I will do my best." Lin Yuan's words attracted the attention of Lu Yifan and the other 100 sequence members. Lu Yifan did not probe too much into Black's strength. He just asked, "Do you know the risks of the general execution battle? Once you enter the stage, you and the opposing general will either be heavily injured or only one will survive. There is no way to concede defeat in such a match." 7017K. Chapter 1704. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan nodded. He didn't make any promises and only continued to emphasize his point. "I will do my best." Hearing Black's words, Lu Yifan took a deep breath. Then he said to Lin Yuan, "Don't worry. In a general slaying battle, the main general is only allowed to use one prized artifact. This is one of the rules. You must remember it." since you have chosen to be the main general of the general execution battle. Before the team competition, the team will try their best to meet your team's needs. You can choose your 3 teammates yourself, based on the strength of the other team. If Chinyu goes up, I will go up and help you. At the same time, I will do everything I can to protect you. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan had taken the initiative to assume the responsibility of the commander, Lu Jie could not help but look a little worried. As the main general, Lin Yuan could only help once in the first 2 duels. But if he went up to help, it would be equivalent to giving up the opportunity to participate in the team battle. This would greatly affect his team's combat strength in the team battle. However, Lin Yuan had put himself in danger. As a retainer, he had to consider the overall situation and could not follow Lin Yuan and share his joys and sorrows. Lu Jie blamed himself, but there was nothing he could do. After all, that was how the rules were made. Zhongzhe and Gao Feng were very worried about Lin Yuan's safety. However, their thoughts were completely different from Lu Jie's. Both felt that Lin Yuan was indeed the most suitable candidate to be the commander. This was because Lin Yuan was an unconventional healing-type spirit chi professional. Not only could it heal itself, but it could also restore its spiritual power. This way, Lin Yuan could recover at any time during the battle. After the 3 general duels, as the main general, Lin Yuan was able to put himself in the best state as much as possible. This was very necessary for the 3rd match. Moreover, Lu Yifan had said it. With Lin Yuan as the main general, Lin Yuan could ask anyone in the team to go on stage. If the opponent's Chinyu went up, Lu Yifan could follow. If the opponent sent someone favored by Her Holiness to fight, their side would also send a disciple of Her Holiness to fight. As a result, when the 3rd match of the general execution battle began, Chu Feng's eyes lit up. His teammates could do their best to protect Lin Yuan's safety. It was to prevent Lin Yuan from consuming too much spiritual power in battle. After making the decision, Lu Yifan took a step back. Lin Yuan took a step forward and arrived in front of Lu Yifan. Lu Yifan and Lin Yuan's actions instantly let the Starweb audience know. In the Battle of the Generals, Black had to take on the role of the main general. The Starweb viewers had never seen the face behind the black mask. However, it had been confirmed that Black was only an 18 or 19-year-old boy. Many of the Starweb viewers, regardless of whether they liked to criticize or not, at this moment, tears welled up in his eyes. A teenager who should have been in school, but he had already used his shoulders to shoulder the glory of radiance, using life and death to decide Hui Yao's reputation. In the beginning, many people thought that it would be a showdown between the younger generations of the Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation. It was a friendly match and a challenge. However, after Li Su mentioned the 10,000 Nations Conference, all of the Hui Yao audience members no longer thought that way. The Assembly of Myriad States touched the hearts of every citizen of the origin world who lived in the Federation. After the Assembly of 10,000 States had ended, every federation had its own federation. They would always welcome the bodies of the dead envoys and knights back with national funerals. While the Assembly of 10,000 Nations demonstrated the strength of the great nations, it was also an elegy for heroes. Therefore, starting from Li Su's mention of the Assembly of Myriad States, all of the Star Web viewers knew that this showdown would be a bloody battle. Qi Zhongling. I used to love watching duels and Star Web duels. As long as they were more exciting, I would always go to the Celestial Stairway video library to watch them. But now, I don't know why, but I don't dare to watch the next duel. St. Heart White Tiger. Black took a step forward. Is he going to be the main general? Oh my god, my heart is in knots. Black must win. Person taking action. The position of the main general is the most important in the battle of the generals. Why aren't the other 4 disciples stepping forward, but Black is the main general? I feel that it would be better for Lord Lu Yifan to do it himself, right? Remote Blossom. I think we don't have to think so much. Just pray and pray. I don't really dare to watch this duel, but I must watch it. I must remember how these heroes used their lives to defend the glory of the Radiance Federation. All the decisions on the Freedom Federation side were not like those on the Radiance Federation side, which were discussed by Liu Yifan and the other 10 teammates. On the Freedom Federation side, everything was decided by Qianyu alone. At first, Yinling wanted to be the main general herself. As the Freedom Federation's pride, Yinling didn't really care about the Radiance Federation's younger generation. After all, Yinling had never suffered any setbacks among her peers since she was young. She was even favored by the three Her Majesty at the same time. However, Qianyu immediately rejected Yinling's decision. He said to Yinling, Yinling, your strength is mainly reflected in your cooperation with Kai Hua and Yu Changjian. For this kind of battle of the generals, only the first match can guarantee that all three of you will be present at the same time. But if Kai Hua or Yu Changjian goes up for the first match, you will be able to participate in the team battle after killing that silver mask kid from the Radiance Federation. But without Kai Hua and Yu Changjian, you won't be able to play your role. Qianyu was in a bad mood. Her Majesty, who favored him, was openly trying to rope him in, and it made Qianyu feel a surge of pressure in his heart. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep his position with Goddess Lian. Therefore, Qianyu, who was in a bad mood, brought his emotions into the conversation with Yinling. Qianyu's original intention was that Yinling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian would be able to play the greatest role in the team battle. However, when Yinling heard it, she felt as though Qianyu was looking down on her strength. This feeling made Yinling feel rather displeased. Qianyu turned to look at the silver-haired Shota in the team. Luo said, Luo, why don't you participate in the Battle of the Generals? Why don't you participate in the Battle of the Generals as the main general? In fact, Qianyu's heart had long been set on Luo. Yinling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian were Her Majesty's favored ones, but Luo was indeed Her Majesty's new disciple. The Freedom Federation could have many Her Majesty's favored ones, but there was only one disciple. Qianyu didn't expect that after he finished commanding and was preparing to confirm the main general for the Battle of the Generals. Then, Luo rejected him. I'm not suitable for prolonged battles, and I don't have the healing and spiritual power recovery ability. I will only participate in the Battle of the Generals. Don't ask me to participate in the Battle of the Generals. Luo had rejected Qianyu's request and made him lose face. However, Qianyu didn't say anything else. As Her Majesty's disciple, Luo indeed had the qualifications to say no. Since Luo wasn't willing to go, Qianyu shifted his gaze to the Freedom Federation's second hidden card apart from Luo, 7017K. Chapter 1705. Standing behind Yinling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian was a blonde youth who stood shoulder to shoulder with Luo. Qianyu said, Han Qi, you will be participating in the General Execution Battle. This General Execution Battle is a good opportunity for you to display your strength. You performed outstandingly this time and won the General Execution Battle. His Majesty Du Miao should be able to accept you as a disciple after your return. In the Freedom Federation, being a Majesty's favored and a disciple were two different things. Favored were only those of the younger generation favored by His Majesty. His Majesty would pour a certain amount of resources into the favored. Among the favored, they would compete with each other to gain face for His Majesty. If a younger generation could be favored by more majesties, then the status of the younger generation in the Freedom Federation would be higher. To His Majesty Du Miao, the favored were considered outsiders. For example, His Majesty Du Miao, who had the most favored, had 73 favored. Thus, in the Freedom Federation, becoming a favored was far better than becoming a disciple of His Majesty. This was also why Luo dared to directly reject Qianyu. If any of Kai Hua, Yinling, or Yu Changjian were arranged by Qianyu, even if the three of them were unwilling, they had no right to reject. Han Qi had long been a disciple of His Majesty Du Miao. Du Miao had publicly stated that. This caused some of the Freedom Federation's majesties to take a fancy to Han Qi's talent. They also did not accept Han Qi as a favored. He did not obtain the status of a favored, nor was he publicly accepted as a disciple by Du Miao. This caused Han Qi to be in an extremely awkward situation for the past few years. When he followed Kai Hua, Yinling, and Yu Changjian, he was often ostracized by Yin Ling. On the contrary, Luo was rather friendly towards him. To be honest, Han Qi felt that. If he were to fight one-on-one against Yin Ling, Kai Hua, or Yu Changjian, it was a situation where he was certain of his victory. Compared to Luo, although he was not as strong as Luo, however, his own combat ability was indeed more comprehensive. He had his own methods for healing and support. He had developed according to the general of the general execution battle. Thus, Han Qi nodded and said firmly, "Sir Qianyu, don't worry. With me on the field, I will do my best to kill all the people that the other side sends out." Actually, a month ago, His Highness Du Miao had given Han Qi a few pointers. He also gave Han Qi some resources. He seemed to have the intention of openly accepting Han Qi as his disciple. However, it was precisely because His Holiness Du Miao had made a move and clashed with the Radiance Federation through the astronomical phenomenon. He had been hit by some method of the Radiance Federation's Her Holiness and was in seclusion. As a result, Han Qi could not follow the envoys to the Radiance Federation this time, obtain the status of His Holiness's disciple. Han Qi had thought more than once that if he obtained the status of Her Holiness's disciple, how would Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian dare to put on airs in front of him? Even if Qianyu were to request for him to participate in the general slaying battle, he would not go, just like Luo. Even Qianyu wouldn't dare to say anything. In Han Qi's eyes, all of this was caused by the Radiance Federation. Therefore, Han Qi hated the Radiance Federation from the bottom of his heart. In Han Qi's opinion, the Radiance Federation was blocking his great future. Therefore, Han Qi was already filled with hostility and killing intent toward the Radiance Federation's side, even though he had yet to enter the arena. Qianyu had just been rejected by Luo. Now, Han Qi had given him enough face. Although Han Qi did not have any status, he was still a disciple that Lord Du Miao had chosen. This time, if Han Qi could win the general execution battle and return to the Freedom Federation, His Holiness Du Miao was almost certain to take Han Qi as his disciple. Qianyu was quite satisfied that a future disciple of His Holiness was being so polite to him. Han Qi, the general slaying battle this time will depend on you. The general execution battle is a battle in which both sides will jointly select their leading generals, and then the leading generals will jointly select their team members. If the opponent doesn't arrange for His Holiness's disciple to fight, I will also match you with the Liberal 100 sequence members that we have meticulously nurtured. Your individual combat ability far surpasses that of Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian. We'll wait for your good news. Qianyu was complimenting Han Qi. However, Qianyu's words caused the gazes of Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian to turn cold. The three of them were His Majesty's caretakers, and their sacred source life forms could be linked to each other. They had already been designated as S+ grade strategic resources by the Freedom Federation. Ever since the three of them had contracted the sacred source life forms, they had been placed on a pedestal. The resources that the three of them had used to increase their strength had not only come from His Majesty's caretakers. The Mirror God, who was in charge of the Freedom Federation's treasury, had also provided them with resources. Although the three of them were not His Majesty's disciples, the treatment they enjoyed was not much worse than His Majesty's disciples. Therefore, the three of them were very arrogant. Although Han Qi's individual combat ability was indeed strong, what Qianyu had said was the truth. However, the three of them still could not accept all of this with their pride. Qianyu was the freedom envoy, so the three of them could not do anything. However, the three of them did not have the slightest good expression toward Han Qi. It was clearly Qianyu's words, but the three of them had vented their displeasure on Han Qi. Han Qi, you are indeed our hidden card. But who can guarantee that the Radiance Federation does not have any hidden cards? Just don't screw up. His Majesty Du Miao has never confirmed to accept you as a disciple. If you do something embarrassing and are despised by His Majesty Du Miao, then His Majesty Du Miao will very likely give up on you. Go and choose a newcomer that he likes. Kai Hua and Yu Changjian were both people with deep thoughts. It was just that Kai Hua did not like to stand out, while Yu Changjian was slightly more impatient. The problem with their personalities was not considered serious. At the very least, they would not be hated. However, Yinling was the kind of person who spoke without thinking, was harsh with her words, and thought highly of herself. This sentence of Yinling's was equivalent to raising 1,000 blades, stabbing into Han Chi's heart. It could be said that the few points that Han Chi was worried about had all been put out in the open by Yinling. Yinling's words made the Freedom Federation's envoy silent for a long time. Qian Yu frowned and glared at Yinling, but he did not say anything else. At that moment, the Radiance Federation's Majesty, Lu Wensheng, was already standing on the golden stone pillar. He said, "This competition will be held in the Radiance Sacred Altars martial arts field in reality. This duel will be held in the Radiance Sacred Altars martial arts arena in reality. It will be broadcasted on the Star Web. All the specifications of the martial arts field will be built according to the Myriad Nations Convention specifications. The General Execution Battle will be held in the center of the martial arts field on the General Execution stage with an area of 5,000 square meters. Next, everyone will move to the General Execution stage of the martial arts field, 7,017K. Chapter 1706. At that moment, the Radiance Hunter sequence test had officially ended. This was because this was a battle between the younger generation of the Radiance sect and the younger generation of the Freedom Federation. He was no longer within the scope of the Radiance 100 sequence selection. Only the Radiance Empire's eminences, the Radiance 100 sequence members, and the members of the two Federation envoys would head to the training ground. However, everyone in the Radiance Federation who logged into the Star Web could see this scene in real time. Black was chosen as the general of the beheading general battle. All the Star Web netizens knew about it. In this battle, Black wanted to display its true strength and summon its fae. In the past, the audience hoped that Black would use all his trump cards in the battle. It was to satisfy the curiosity of the Star Web viewers and find out what kind of phase Black had. But at that moment, the Star Web audience's thoughts had undergone a 180-degree change. The Star Web viewers no longer wished for Black to reveal all his trump cards during the battle. Instead, he hoped that Black would have more trump cards to deal with the enemy. 8 months ago, a youth dressed in black and wearing a silver mask appeared out of nowhere. First, he saved Millstone Town under the sea of insects. After that, he stopped the rampaging exotic beast tide in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift. He had prevented the crisis of the exotic beasts wreaking havoc. The young man was still dressed in black and wore a silver mask. He was given the title of Radiance's main general. Upholding the glory of the Radiant Glory, they would fight a life and death battle with the Freedom Federation. Every step of this youth seemed to be stepping on the hearts of the Star Web audience. Every step was so heavy, so hot-blooded. The youth's footsteps made the Star Web viewers suddenly understand. The reason why this youth was so determined was because of a will called Radiance and the responsibility to protect the land beneath his feet. Lu Yifan took 2 steps forward and spoke to Lin Yuan. "I'm not too sure how strong you are. If after the first battle, you feel that the opponent's main general is too strong, I can send either Zhongzhe or Lu Jie to help you in the second round. Do your best to kill the enemy's commander. This way, we can avoid the third duel between you and the enemy's commander." Lu Yifan would say such a thing at this time. First, it was to give Black confidence. Secondly, Lu Yifan did not understand Black's strength. He intended to allow Black to choose its own teammates based on the actual situation. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan shook his head firmly at Lu Yifan. "In a situation where the opponent doesn't send the favored ones, I only need Li Nao, Zhang Ziheo, and the others to come forward and cooperate with me. I can do it, trust me." Hearing Black's words, Lu Yifan was slightly startled. From Black's words, Lu Yifan could feel a strong sense of confidence. He also had the ability to comfort people in times of crisis. Zhongzhe and Lu Jie had seen Lin Yuan's strength. He did not think that anyone in the younger generation could wrestle with Lin Yuan. After all, Lin Yuan had obtained his sacred source life form a few months ago. He could deliver a full-powered attack that was equivalent to a Fae at the peak of Myth I. This attack was Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the Heaven's Crimson Flames, which had reached level 4. Zhongzhe had activated the Heaven's Crimson Fire with all his might, but was still defeated by Lin Yuan's attack. Even so, this duel still concerned Lin Yuan's life and death. Therefore, the two of them were extremely worried. At this moment, the Star Web viewers, including the Moon Empress, were watching the battle. They were also immersed in Lin Yuan's words. "I can do it. Believe me in this sentence." The Moon Empress took a deep breath and looked at Lin Yuan's hair. Shueshuo was hiding in Lin Yuan's hair. This was the reason why the Moon Empress could be at ease. It was not that the Moon Empress did not believe in Lin Yuan. It was just that Lin Yuan was too important to the Moon Empress. The Moon Empress could not imagine what her world would become if she really lost Lin Yuan. Chu Xi hugged the Mother of Bloodbath tightly. Her nervous arms were trembling, and her eyes were holding back tears. Chu Xi finally understood why Lin Yuan did not agree to let her participate in this year's Radiance 100 sequence selection. Moreover, he looked so determined. Lin Yuan must have known that this situation would happen. Feeling the trembling Chu Xi, the Mother of Bloodbath gently hugged Chu Xi and said, "Chu Xi, Lin Yuan will be fine." Her father, Shueshuo, was only at the early stage of the Eternal Realm. In a lava land, he had absorbed the fire elemental energy that her mother had left behind. Her father's strength had reached the high-level Eternal Realm and was just one step away from the peak of the Eternal Realm. Her father's strength had reached the high-level Eternal Realm and was just one step away from the peak of the Eternal Realm. This kind of strength was enough to protect Lin Yuan. Moreover, the Radiance Elder and the Moon Empress were both present. Even if the Pity Goddess wanted to do something, there was nothing she could do. However, if her father really made a move, the situation of the entire continent would be in turmoil in an instant. The Mother of Bloodbath did not understand the situation of the Radiance. However, it knew that the Radiance had just opened a Class 6 Abyss dimensional rift that connected to the Abyss world. It still needed some time to develop. Once the Radiance built a mirror image city in the Abyss world, even if the two major federations really fought, the constructed Abyss world would be a haven for the ordinary people of the Radiance. But now, this haven had yet to be completed. All the way to the back of the Radiance Sacred Hall, at the center of the martial arts practice ground, was the General's execution stage. Lin Yuan took a step forward and stood on the General's execution stage. On the Freedom Federation's side, Han Qi, who had been rebuked by Yin Ling, also walked up to the General's execution stage. He looked at Lin Yuan from afar. Han Qi said to Lin Yuan directly, "Those who participate in the General's execution stage now will not be able to participate in the team battle in the future. The two generals that we've chosen will each choose a teammate to go on stage. The first round will be selected first, and the second round will be selected later. What do you think?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan replied, "Just follow the rules of the General's execution stage." Han Qi pointed down the stage. A member of the Independent 100 sequence was chosen. Lin Yuan also waved at the 100 sequence member at the back of the team. When Han Qi saw the person Lin Yuan had chosen, he pointed at an ordinary Independent 100 sequence member on the Freedom Federation side. Yin Lin had given Lin Yuan relevant information on these two people. There was nothing fishy about these two people. However, the information given by Yin Lin did not include the purple-haired youth standing on the stage. There was also the silver-haired youth who had just stood beside the purple-haired youth. These two people, Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian, they were the targets that Lin Yuan needed to focus on. For some reason, Lin Yuan felt that there was something fishy about these two people. There was something fishy about them. As for whether there was anything fishy about these two people, Lin Yuan would be able to find out in the following duel. At that moment, Lin Yuan and Han Qi stood on both ends of the 5,000 square meters arena as the main generals. Two members of the Federation 100 sequence who had been selected to fight stood beside the two of them. The battle was about to begin. 7017K. Chapter 1707. Lin Yuan would take the initiative to step forward and bear the responsibility of becoming the Lieutenant General of the General Battle. This was because after he understood the rules of the general execution battle, he had weighed it in his heart. Lu Jie and Zhong Zhe each had their own methods. In a true life-and-death battle, he could not guarantee that he could defeat Zhong Zhe and Lu Jie. Lin Yuan did not know what trump card Zhong Zhe currently had. He did not know what Lu Jie's sacred source life form could do. It was very likely that a hidden card would suddenly open in the middle of a battle. It would greatly affect the situation on the battlefield. However, compared to the other two, Lin Yuan's Jasmine Lily could heal itself. Little Black could restore his spiritual power. In addition, he had the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint, and Xiao Hei's exclusive skill, Spirit Qi Imprint. With these two imprints activated, he could become a powerful humanoid beast in a short time. Both the Jasmine Lily and Blackie's grade and quality had been upgraded to Diamond X/Fantasy V. After a long period of accumulation of spiritual qi and life energy, Lin Yuan just needed to activate it. Even the spirit qi content of an Emperor-class expert's body might not be comparable to his. Lin Yuan could become an all-around spirit qi professional. Firstly, they had to rely on Lin Yuan's Fey compatibility direction, which would definitely shock the world if he revealed it. Secondly, Morbius' exclusive skill, Spirit Lock, could lock phase and contracted source-type life forms. They could complement Lin Yuan's combat style. After all, he was an all-around spirit qi professional. At a time like this, he naturally had to step forward. To be on the safe side, he could call Lu Jie, Zhong Zhe, and the others. However, this would undoubtedly result in the team competition after the general's beheading battle. His team's members were unable to achieve the best combination. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Lu Yifan, Lu Jie, himself, Zhong Zhe, and Gao Feng. This is the best small group. Only when the five of them work together could they display their greatest strength in a team battle. To deal with the long-planned conspiracy of the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission. For the Freedom Federation to dare to do such a thing, they must have already calculated Lu Yifan and Zhong Zhe's strength. Moreover, it would raise expectations. The variable on his side was Gao Feng's sacred source life form, Lu Jie's insect carcinoma Fei, and himself. If they wanted to win, they needed to be in a state of complete victory. He had already seen Li Nao and Zhang Ziheo's strength. Both of them were at the level of the 100 sequence. He was an existence that Lin Yuan could only look up to half a year ago. But now, facing Li Nao and Zhang Ziheo, as long as Lin Yuan was willing to reveal his strength, he would be able to do so. He was able to kill the two of them in an extremely short period of time. In fact, if he wanted to kill Li Nao and Zhang Ziheo, he only needed to mobilize the source sand. It could be said that the other 100 sequence members, whether it was a team battle or a general battle, as long as they stepped onto the stage, they were destined to be cannon fodder. If the two sides clashed, it was very likely that they would be killed immediately. It was impossible for Lin Yuan to watch these 200 sequence members die. He still had to protect them. At this moment, the purple-haired Han Chi thought of something. He raised his left fist and said, "According to the rules, before the general execution battle, every general can make a request. My request is to allow the use of artifacts during the general execution battle." Lu Wensheng glanced at the ring on Han Chi's index finger, the short blade on his waist, and the purple gold bracer on his wrist. These were all artifacts. Activating a treasure artifact consumed spiritual energy. However, the spiritual power required to activate the artifacts was far less than the spiritual power required to control phase. The Freedom Federation nurtured His Majesty's favored. When the favored was very young, His Majesty would bestow him with an artifact. This artifact might not be very compatible with the favored. However, His Majesty's favored was still a blank piece of paper without many lines. Some His Majesty's favored took an unconventional approach. In order to increase their strength in a short period of time, they would use the artifact they obtained as the foundation and build a phase system around the artifact. With an artifact in hand, the Spirit Qi professional's combat power and survivability would also increase. As for the Radiance Federation, Even His Majesty's disciple would have a mature combat system and have his own style. After forming a contract with his first sacred source life form, only then would he obtain one, according to his current direction, tailoring a sacred source life form's main material, creating an artifact that was completely compatible with him. These two methods of nurturing the younger generation could not be said to be good or bad. The Freedom Federation focused on nurturing the spirit chi professionals in the early stages. As for the Radiance Federation, it focused more on the later stages. However, the Freedom Federation's nurturing method for the younger generation, it was undoubtedly more advantageous than the Radiance Federation, as long as the commander's request was in line with the rules and did not violate the principle of fairness. It had to be satisfied. After Han Shi made his request, he pulled out the purple-black short blade on his waist. This short blade looked like a beast's fang. It was densely covered with strange, snake-shaped patterns. It was as though it was faintly absorbing the vitality of other targets in the surrounding environment apart from Han Chi. After Han Chi pulled out this artifact, the two Liberal 100 Sequence members hurriedly moved 5 steps to the side. They quickly took 5 steps to the side. What the two of them did was to protect themselves. Otherwise, their life force would be absorbed by the purple dagger. Before the fight even started, they would become dry bones under this short blade. Han Chi's title in the Freedom Federation was Purple Demon Blade. The purple-black short blade in Han Chi's hand could be said to have become Han Chi's trademark. Han Chi was a typical example of being bestowed an artifact at the age of 10 in the Freedom Federation. All the phase and artifacts that came later were all paired with an artifact. On the side of the artifact, a few days ago, the Moon Empress had given Lin Yuan a total of 5 artifacts. These 5 artifacts had been placed in the Spirit Lock Spatial Zone by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan did not have any intention of using them. These 5 artifacts might be all-purpose artifacts. There were almost no restrictions on the user. However, Lin Yuan was not used to fighting with artifacts. In an evenly matched battle, he would use a power that he was not good at. It was very likely that it would have the opposite effect. Lin Yuan had many methods and did not need to worry at all. It was never about not having the means to deal with the enemy. Instead, it was about how to distribute the spiritual power in his body to be more reasonable. Just as Han Chi was about to take off the ring artifact in his hand and throw it into the sky, the 4 strange eyes on the ring rotated back and forth. Just as something was about to be summoned, Lin Yuan opened his mouth and said, "My request is that both parties can only use 1 artifact at most." Lin Yuan's words caused a smile on Han Chi's face to suddenly freeze. 7017K. Chapter 1708. In the general slaying battle, after one side made a request, it was true that the other party could restrict the other party's requests. Lin Yuan did not make any new requests. Instead, he used this opportunity to limit the number of treasures that Han Chi could use. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's request, Han Chi snorted coldly. "What is this? Are you afraid? You want to use a prized artifact to fight me? If that is the case, why don't you take the lead and state that both sides cannot use prized artifacts?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan shook his head. "No, I should thank you for making that request. In the general execution battle, I do have a prized artifact that I must utilize." After saying that, he took out a golden brocade pouch. This was the one that Chef Supreme had given Lin Yuan. A prized artifact made from the skin and stomach of the treasure cave, Golden Toad. It was originally just a Tier 2 prized artifact. However, after the Moon Empress refinement and the addition of the 2 treasure cave Golden Toad's eyes, the Golden Toad's body had become much stronger. The grade of this treasure had already reached 3 stars. Lin Yuan had just used Morbius True Data. He examined the purple dagger in Han Chi's hand. He knew that the purple short saber in Han Chi's hand was a 5-star treasured artifact. A 5-star artifact was forged from the body of a 5-star sacred source life form, at the very least. A treasure artifact could inherit a portion of a sacred source life form's abilities. The treasure in Han Chi's hands was called the Demon Lizard Tooth Blade. It was refined from the teeth of a 5-star sacred source life form, the Desolate Demonic Lizard. Lin Yuan didn't know what the Desolate Demon Lizard's ability was. As a 5-star artifact, the Demon Lizard Fong Blade had 2 abilities that excelled in combat. Desolation Guard. By absorbing the life energy of the surrounding environment and living beings, one can form a shield outlined by demonic patterns for oneself. Any living being that comes into contact with the shield will have their life force quickly drained by the demonic patterns. 2. Race Judgment. After the Devil Blade absorbs the life energy of a life form, it will analyze the life energy. If there is a life form within a certain range, the life energy will be automatically absorbed by the Devil Blade. When Lin Yuan saw Han Chi's treasure artifacts function, his pupils suddenly constricted. He had always felt that Red Thorn and Silver Splendor were invincible to a certain extent. It was very difficult to be countered by a natural enemy. But now he was wrong. The treasure in Han Chi's hand, the Demon Lizard Tooth Blade. This was the trump card against Silver Splendor and Red Thorn. The first ability could even allow Han Chi to wield the Demon Lizard Fong Blade willfully and slash at the Sea of Flowers as he pleased. The life energy obtained from killing the Bone Lotus Flowers and Child Ramets. He was able to block the attack of the Gluttonous Vines. And once he used his second ability, Race's Adjudication, the Sea of Flowers formed by Red Thorn and Silver Essence would instantly become the source of energy for the Demon Lizard Fong Blade. It could be said that the Monster Lizard Tooth Blade was extremely effective against creatures that relied on splitting themselves to attack as a whole. Not only did the Demon Lizard Fong Blade restrain Red Thorn and Silver Splendor, it also had a great restraining effect on Lu Jie. The current Lu Jie was not only relying on the Insect Queen Sea of Insects to fight. However, Insect-type Carcinoma Phase relied on rapid growth to wreak havoc. Right now, Han Chi could be used as the main general to ascend the general beheading platform. Lin Yuan felt that this was excellent news. Otherwise, Han Chi, who wielded the treasure weapon, the Demon Lizard Tooth Blade, in a team battle, it would definitely be a scourge. Even a Class 4 Creation Master would not be able to see how extraordinary a Class 5 artifact was with just a glance. Only a Class 5 Creation Master that had contracted a Sacred Source life form would be able to pry into the artifact. Therefore, no one from the Freedom Federation felt that Lin Yuan had already seen through the Demon Lizard Fong Blade's ability. Han Chi was not a Creation Master. They did not know what exactly was the artifact that Lin Yuan had taken out. Knowing that this battle was not going to be easy, Han Chi kept the ring and put it back on his hand. He assumed an offensive stance. However, the Chef Supreme and the Moon Empress, who were very familiar with this artifact, were startled. They immediately understood why Lin Yuan had said that he had to use an artifact during the general beheading platform. The artifact that was made from the Treasure Cave Golden Toad did not have a trace of combat ability. It was a pure support-type artifact. Now that Lin Yuan had taken out this artifact, his intention was very obvious. He was planning to put the other 2 Radiance 100 sequence members inside. He was going to fight against the other 3 sequence members by himself. The massive hourglass in the center of the general beheading platform was about to turn. The moment the hourglass turned, the battle officially began. Lin Yuan looked at the 200 sequence members beside him and said, "In a while, you 2 will enter this artifact. In a while, when the battle begins, you 2 will enter this artifact." Lin Yuan did not say anything else, but the 2 of them knew why Black had said this. Their strength was indeed 1 level lower than Black's. In the battle, the 2 of them might die from that purplish-black dagger-shaped artifact right from the start. At this stage, the Radiance 100 sequence members knew about artifacts. It was beyond the knowledge of the 100 sequence members. The 2 of them walked up the platform and stood firmly beside Lin Yuan. This was because the 2 of them had already made the decision to sacrifice themselves to protect the glory of Radiance. At that moment, looking at Black's expression, the 2 of them were not bashful. They nodded immediately. Since Black had taken out this artifact, it meant that Black really wanted to protect the 2 of them. Otherwise, he would not have wasted the right to use the artifact for no reason. If the 2 of them insisted on staying outside, Firstly, it would not have any effect. Secondly, Black might be distracted to take care of the two of them. Therefore, the moment the golden hourglass turned over, the two of them entered the artifact made of the treasure cave, golden toad's skin and stomach sack. Before Lin Yuan could put it away, the artifact made of the treasure cave, golden toad's skin and stomach sack. The amber button-shaped source sand on his sleeve had already landed on the platform. It turned into quicksand and escaped into the platform. A large amount of sand began to be produced. This was not a battle of survival. Not to mention the two independent 100 sequence members. Han Shi, the Freedom Federation's elite, had long understood the mechanism of using the source sand. He knew that the source sand needed time to produce sand. Therefore, Han Shi would not give Lin Yuan the time to produce sand. Originally, Han Shi wanted to kill 2 more Radiant's 100 sequence members. However, in this situation, Black was the only one left on the scene. Han Shi could only use Black as his target. A purplish-blue shadow almost turned over as soon as the hourglass turned over. He suddenly charged towards Black. This purplish-blue shadow did not give Black time to summon his Fae at all. Black stored the 2 Radiant's 100 sequence members into the artifact. Although it was extremely fast, it'd take 1 or 2 seconds. In a battle between experts, 1 or 2 seconds was enough to determine life and death. Everyone who logged into the star web held their breaths, and their hearts trembled. It was obvious that there was no time to summon his Fae. Everyone saw Black suddenly clench his left fist. It faced the purplish-blue shadow that Han Shi released. 7017K. Chapter 1709. All the spectators on the star web had a doubt amidst the horror. What is Black going to do? Why is he using his body to touch the killer move? It was common knowledge that Spirit Chi professionals had weak bodies. Even ordinary people who were not Spirit Chi professionals knew about it. Even S-rank Spirit Chi professionals could use their spiritual power to support a Spirit Chi shield. The Spirit Chi shield had a Spirit Chi cyclone that could effectively help resist damage. Unless they were in a desperate situation, S-rank Spirit Chi professionals would never easily expose themselves to the opponent's attack. Firstly, using the Spirit Chi shield to resist damage consumed too much spiritual power. Secondly, the Spirit Chi shield was not comparable to a shield casually cast by defense-type Fae. Black was a Pinnacle Emperor-class expert with a Suzerain X/Myth 3 Fae. The strength of the Spirit Chi shield's defensive ability was about the same. It was about the strength of a Suzerain V/Myth, a defense-type Fae's defensive ability. Black could not be an S-rank Spirit Chi professional. It was impossible for him to have a Spirit Chi shield. As a B-rank Spirit Chi professional, Black did not have any defensive ability. Everyone did not know if this was Black's defense in a moment of desperation or if he really had no other choice. He was prepared to use an arm as the price to block this dark purple figure's attack. However, this was clearly a Pinnacle Fantasy breed bluish-purple shadow. How could it be blocked by losing an arm? Moreover, if Black really lost an arm, even if he could not die, by using the time of losing an arm, he could summon a Fae to block. Then Black would become a cripple. In the future, he would encounter many restrictions. However, the scene that everyone imagined did not happen. After this bluish-purple shadow collided with Black's fist, a turbulent air wave swept in all directions. A faint yellow dust wave was set off on the General Slaughter platform. Only then did everyone clearly see what that purplish-blue shadow was. These were spirit snakes that were about the length of a forearm, and their bodies were purplish-blue with faint golden patterns on them. Lin Yuan used Morbius True Data to check this bluish-purple spirit snake. He knew that this spirit snake was a Diamond X/Fantasy V Serene Bamboo Viper, a wind-poison dual attribute Diamond X/Fantasy V. The specialty of Viper species phase was that they had a large amount of venom and were highly toxic. In the process of cultivating this Serene Bamboo Viper, its cultivation method focused on strengthening its speed and toxicity. Otherwise, if a snake species Fae didn't have any acceleration, it wouldn't be able to survive. It was simply impossible to cross a distance of 5 kilometers in 1 or 2 seconds. This kind of speed, in a sense, can be said to be extremely fast. It had already surpassed myth-breed flying-type phase. The hearts of the Star Web audience sank to the bottom. This was because the blue spirit snake did not simply collide with Black. Instead, he opened his mouth and bit Black's fist. Everyone thought that Black would be sent flying after being bitten by the blue spirit snake. However, a shocking scene unfolded before his eyes. The force from Black's fist traveled along its jaw and into the body of the orchid viper. The dark blue spirit snake was sent flying. It rolled on the ground a few times, its expression weary. However, he could still move normally. It was just that his lower jaw had been shaken so much that he could no longer close it. All the viewers on StarWeb couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. Then they cheered. Peace is blessings. What's going on with Black? Why is his physical strength stronger than a Fae? Black can't be a humanoid Fae, right? Star Space, it's simply great. I thought that Black would be severely injured by this blue spirit snake's attack. If Black is severely injured in the first round of the general slaying battle, he won't be able to proceed with the next 2 rounds. Lucky little panda, your hearts are too big. This kind of small snake species Fae's strongest point is its unparalleled toxicity. Black's fist was just bitten by this snake Fae. Don't tell me you didn't notice. It's over. As long as a venomous Fae bites its opponent, it will be the strongest. Even if Black is really a Fae, he won't be able to withstand it, let alone a spirit chi professional. Han Chi felt the serene bamboo viper's injury and had a general assessment of Black's physical attack. Black's physical attack had truly shocked Han Chi. The power of Black's punch was actually comparable to the power of his 5-star artifact, the Demon Lizard Fong Blade. Furthermore, Black's punch was able to condense the explosive power at one point. Otherwise, the serene bamboo viper's jaw wouldn't have been so severely injured that it would be a problem for it to merge. Even though the serene bamboo viper was injured, Han Chi still revealed a smile as if he had grasped the situation. The serene bamboo viper had a kind of chronic poison. It would take nearly an hour for this poison to fully take effect. This poison would deprive a person's 5 senses bit by bit and affect their mind. Finally, they would become dependent on the serene bamboo viper's venom. Eventually, their minds would be controlled by the venom, and they would listen to the serene bamboo viper's instructions. The snake venom might be constantly consumed, but as long as the serene bamboo viper injected more venom into the silver-masked youth's body, it would be able to keep controlling this youth. According to the 10,000 States Assembly's rules, any opponent that entered the general slaying battle and was attacked until they couldn't resist, they would become the victor's spoils of war. Black was about to become Han Chi's spoils of war. Han Chi remembered that Her Holiness the Compassionate Goddess was quite interested in Black just now. Han Chi planned to take the spoils of war that were completely obedient to him and offer them to the Goddess of Mercy. Perhaps if the Goddess of Compassion was happy, she would give him some benefits. Han Chi understood his situation very well. As long as he performed outstandingly in the general execution battle, he could defeat his opponent. When he returned, he would definitely become Du Miao's disciple. If he could obtain some benefits from the Goddess of Mercy, he would undoubtedly be able to improve further. Then, he would fight for the position of Freedom Envoy next year. As long as he could become a Freedom Envoy, as a disciple of His Holiness, he would be able to become a Freedom Envoy. This was tantamount to truly standing at the peak of the Freedom Federation's younger generation. Han Chi's thoughts were extremely good, and he even had the idea of pleasing the Goddess of Mercy. However, he didn't know that when the pity god saw Lin Yuan's fist being bitten by the nether bamboo viper, she frowned. The Goddess of Mercy was indifferent to life and death. She used the beautiful life of the skin as a toy to please herself. But now, seeing Black injured, Compassion Goddess's body instinctively gave birth to a feeling of distress and anger. It was a wonderful and special feeling for Goddess Lian's entire life. This was because Lian Shun had never felt this way before. Even the last merman had been killed by the second page revival. Her sacred source life form that possessed the merman bloodline, her holiness, had been killed by the Moon Empress. Compassion goddess Lien Shen only felt anger, but not heartache. 7017K. Chapter 1710. Lin Yuan looked at his fist that had been bitten by the nether bamboo viper and shook his fist without a care. Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. It was a Diamond X/Fantasy V Serene Bamboo Viper. As expected of the Freedom Federation's top youths who had poured their entire lives of resources into nurturing this spirit creature. It was completely different from ordinary Diamond X/Fantasy V phase. Otherwise, when he used Xiao Hei's exclusive skill, Spirit Purity Burst, with 80% of his strength, he would not be able to survive. It was impossible for the Serene Bamboo Viper to still move. It had to be known that Lin Yuan now possessed Spirit Qi. Due to the constant evolution of the Spirit Lock spatial zone, it had become pure. The power of the spiritual essence explosion had also increased quite a bit compared to the time at the Great Night Assembly. He was now using 80% of his power to fight a Diamond X/Fantasy V Fae that had been nurtured using ordinary methods. Even if he didn't hammer the Fae to death, it wouldn't be able to move. His first clash with the purple-haired youth had made him realize that he was not as powerful as the purple-haired youth. This purple-haired youth that Yin Lin hadn't given him any information on was a hidden trump card of the Freedom Federation. Since that was the case, that white-haired youth who also had no information on him should also be the Freedom Federation's hidden card. In this way, Qin Yu, Kai Hua, Yin Ling, and Yu Changjian, who could interact with sacred source life forms. Together with the white-haired youth, the five of them formed the best team. At that thought, Lin Yuan's heart sank. He knew that in the general execution battle, if possible, he had to try his best not to reveal his trump card. Save as many trump cards as possible for the team to use. Lin Yuan had previously asked the princess to store the Pinnacle Myth 2 Vicious Venom Law. Now, the Vicious Poison Law had been raised to Myth 3. In addition, he had recently absorbed a few world crystals. Coincidentally, there was a poison-type world crystal among them. Therefore, he was no longer afraid of any poison phase below Myth 2. Based on the abilities that the princess had given him, Lin Yuan was now truly immune to poison. Logically speaking, once one was poisoned, the wound would quickly swell. A dreamy blue liquid flowed out of Lin Yuan's injured fist. The liquid happened to be the poison that the nether bamboo viper had injected into Lin Yuan's body. As the life force in his body surged, the wound healed naturally. The transformation of the Black Palm shocked the Starweb viewers once again. At the same time, the ones who were stunned the longest were the veteran forces and the top forces. He had also recovered from the extreme shock. Logically speaking, the disciples of the veteran forces and the top forces were very knowledgeable, and it was very difficult for them to encounter anything that could surprise them. However, what he saw was too shocking. During the battle between the Moon Empress disciple, Lin Yuan, and Chef Supreme's disciple, Zhongzhe, in the Great Night Assembly, Lin Yuan's punch was so similar. This kind of ability to rely on the physical body to launch such a powerful attack. There wouldn't be a second person in the entire Radiance Federation. As a result, the audience members who came from veteran and top forces were shocked. He already knew Black's true identity. It was just that no one dared to divulge this information. After Han Chi learned that Black had used some unknown method to become immune to the poison of the Serene Bamboo Viper, suddenly, he noticed a faint yellow smoke rising from the beheading general's battle arena. The general's battle arena was completely made of white jade. How could there be dust on the white jade shop? Han Chi suddenly thought of Black's sand-type, source-type life form. Thinking of this, Han Chi waved his hand. A 1,000-meter-long giant snake appeared out of thin air in the arena. After this giant snake appeared, it immediately coiled its body and stood up. It protected Han Chi in the middle of the snake's body. At that moment, 3 streams of quicksand drilled through the white jade shop on the general's battle arena. They each grabbed the feet of the 2 independent 100 sequence members, as well as the seriously injured Serene Bamboo Viper. With this flow of sand, as the center, 3 yellow sand vortexes formed. The yellow sand constantly surged, clearly wanting to pull the 2 independent 100 sequence members and the serene bamboo viper into the sea of sand. Everyone knew very well that once they were pulled into the sea of sand, what would be the outcome? These 2 independent 100 sequence members had already summoned their main phase. They wished they could use all kinds of means. However, the strongest main phase of these 2 independent 100 sequence members was only Diamond 2/Fantasy 3. Such strength was nurtured with the best method, and it was a Diamond X/Fantasy V source sand. It simply had no ability to resist. It was understandable that Han Chi didn't protect these 2 independent 100 sequence members. However, if he remained indifferent when the 2 of them were in danger. After the 2 of them were killed, the first general battle arena would be considered the Radiance's side's victory. Therefore, Han Chi had to save these 2 independent 100 sequence members. Han Chi yelled angrily. Floating Earth Serpent, use exclusive skill, Earth Vein Control. Upon hearing Han Chi's instructions, the 1,000-meter-long giant serpent, which was originally coiled up, suddenly let out a roar. A noble aura emitted from this serpent's body. This noble aura caused Lin Yuan's expression to change abruptly. Just like butterfly species phase, they had 3 supreme bloodlines. These butterfly species phase with the 3 supreme bloodlines had an extremely strong suppression on other butterfly species phase. Among the snake phase, there were also 7 supreme bloodlines. These 7 supreme bloodlines could be considered 7 kinds of branches. For example, his master, the Moon Empress, had 2 soaring serpents, 1 green and 1 white. They were one of the 7 snake phase bloodlines. The feathered serpent bloodline was formed after the bloodline had evolved again. At present, the purple-haired youth called the floating earth serpent belonged to the bright serpent bloodline. The bright serpent could be proficient in one attribute and use it to the extreme. The floating earth serpent was obviously a snake species fae that controlled the earth. After the floating earth serpent used its exclusive skill, Earth Vein Control. Indeed, Lin Yuan found that the source sand's movements were blocked. It even lost the ability to continue producing sand in the earth. This was because the floating earth serpent seemed to have become the center of the earth. With its bloodline as the center, it controlled the earth elements underground. However, Han Chi had made a mistake. The source sand could not only produce sand in the earth, but it could also produce close guard sand by consuming spiritual power. Sensing that Han Chi wanted to summon the heavily injured dark bamboo viper back, Lin Yuan sneered. The corners of his mouth under the silver mask hooked up into a sneer. Lin Yuan immediately ordered the source sand. He let the source sand use its exclusive skill, Metal Consume Manifestation, to extract the red lotus soft gold, which had not been used much in battle. Immediately after, the yellow sand that had originally entangled the dark bamboo viper suddenly turned into red crystal threads. The moment these crystal threads attached to the dark bamboo viper let out a mournful wail. In fact, after seeing that the dark bamboo viper had such a fast speed, Lin Yuan became greedy for the dark bamboo viper. He was now ready to implement his plan. 7017K. Chapter 1711. Ever since his source sand had been upgraded to Diamond X/Fantasy V, the source sand had become much stronger. The exclusive skill, Sand Spirit Acceptance, was getting stronger and stronger. However, there were no phase or dimensional life forms suitable for Spirit Acceptance. His exclusive skill, Sand Spirit Acceptance, was still empty. This caused the source sand, which didn't have any skills and only had 2 exclusive skills, to have half of its abilities sealed. However, there was nothing he could do. It was the alien insect, the heart-penetrating iron line, that Lin Yuan had been using to accept the spirit sand. However, the heart-penetrating iron line had already been perfectly replaced by the crystalline threads of the red lotus soft gold that the source sand had devoured through Metal Consume Manifestation. He finally found a phase suitable for the source sand's grain Spirit Acceptance. It was the purple-haired youth's diamond X/fantasy V serene bamboo viper. Firstly, the speed of the serene bamboo viper was fast. Secondly, the serene bamboo viper was extremely poisonous. The nether bamboo viper's venom was harmless to him. However, the nether bamboo viper's venom was enough to kill any fae of the same grade. In fact, he could even face suzerain/myth faes that were stronger than him. As long as the serene bamboo viper pierced the other party's body, it would be able to put the other party to death. He admired the serene bamboo viper's 3 abilities and 1 exclusive skill very much. Snake Body Wind Transformation allows the user to merge their body with the wind, increasing their speed while also concealing themselves. The armor-piercing venomous fangs gave the serene bamboo viper's fangs a certain armor-piercing effect. Although the bite force of the serene bamboo viper was not very strong, it was unable to cause damage to the target through the snake's mouth. However, it could only press its snake-like mouth on the target's skin and armor. The snake's teeth could pierce through the target's defense and spray venom into the target's body. The third skill, Puppet Control, used poison to control the opponent's mind. Moreover, it could continuously inject poison into the target's body, constantly controlling the target. This kind of ability was not very effective in the arena battles. But in a real battle in the wild, as long as this ability bit anyone on the enemy's side, they would be killed. In a situation where the enemy did not understand the effects of the snake venom, it was equivalent to burying a spy in the enemy's team who would listen to him 100%. As for the nether bamboo viper's exclusive skill, it was all snake species phase that used poison as their main method. It was the exclusive skill that everyone dreamed of: poison spread. Objects infected by the toxin would become the host of the toxin. It could spread the poison through the infected body and infect other targets. Snake species phase had a characteristic, and that was venom. As a single target attack, snake species phase were usually more venomous. Snake phase that spat out poisonous mist to attack in groups were less toxic. Right now, the serene bamboo viper was able to use its exclusive skill, poison spread. It could turn a single poison attack into an AoE attack in another way. Under normal circumstances, snake venom was not contagious after infecting an object. This was common sense. In a real life and death battle, the enemy could easily be infected by the venom of the serene bamboo viper while taking care of their teammates. In addition, the serene bamboo viper's skill, Puppet Control. In other words, he could control the effects of the entire team by injecting poison into one person. With such abilities and exclusive skills, the serene bamboo viper could be considered a fae with great strategic significance. However, if such a fae was used in the arena battle, it would be extremely difficult. It was truly overkill. When Han Chi discovered that he had ordered the floating world's bright serpent to use its exclusive skill, Earth Vein Control, the floating world's bright serpent was stunned. It had indeed seized control of most of the sand grains in the land. However, there was still a small portion of the sand that it could not control. It immediately knew that these sand grains that it could not control were the main body of that sand-type source-type life form. The source sand's main body was currently attacking the 2 independent 100 sequence members in the arena. Looking at the 2 liberal 100 sequence members who were exhausted from defending, yet unable to put up any resistance under the attacks, Lin Fan felt a chill run down his spine. He could not help but be furious. Black had used an artifact to take away the 2 Radiance 100 sequence members. Those 2 Radiance 100 sequence members were still alive. Therefore, even if Black was the only one in the arena, it would not be considered a loss. However, if the 2 Liberal 100 sequence members on his side were die, he would lose the first round of the general execution battle. Han Chi clearly wanted to preserve his spiritual power as much as possible. However, he had no choice but to consume his spiritual power to protect these 2 burdens. Han Chi yelled angrily. Before the floating earth snake, do you really think that you can rely on a sand-type, elemental source-type life form to do whatever you want? In front of the floating earth snake, no matter what earth-type mutant you are, you have to submit to the floating earth snake's control. While speaking, Han Shi circulated the spiritual power in his body. The floating earth snake, which was circling in front of Han Shi, raised its head and hissed again. The entire land could not help but tremble. The entire land seemed to be reset by some kind of mighty force. The entire White Jade Shop's general execution stage had been smashed into pieces. The 200-meter deep coating was reversed and stirred. At this moment, Lin Yuan's source sand formed the sand guards. They were evenly distributed in a space of 5,000 square meters and 200 meters underground. The attack that Han Shi had made the floating earth snake unleash could be said to be a fundamental restraint on the source sand. Han Shi stood on the floating earth snake's body and looked down at Lin Yuan. It was as if he was mocking Lin Yuan's incompetence. Right at this moment, Han Shi heard a light, pleasant, and cold voice ring out. It's true that you protected 2 independent 100 sequence members, but do you not care about your Fae? Han Shi had previously discovered that he could not use the contract to keep the Dark Bamboo Viper in his spiritual spatial zone. In order to save the 2 independent 100 sequence members, Han Shi did not have time to care about the Dark Bamboo Viper situation. Upon hearing Black's words, Han Shi hurriedly looked at the Dark Bamboo Viper. Han Shi saw that the Dark Bamboo Viper had been wrapped into a cocoon by the red crystal silk. The Dark Bamboo Viper was in extreme mental pain. Han Shi immediately recognized the red crystal thread. What it was? Red Lotus Soft Gold. How could there be Red Lotus Soft Gold? After a brief shock, Han Shi was about to summon a new Fae to destroy the cocoon formed by the Red Lotus Soft Gold. At that moment, several chain swords shot out from the ground. These chain swords actually formed a huge black box through their own free assembly. The Dark Bamboo Viper, which was wrapped by the Red Lotus Soft Gold, was sealed in this black box. At that moment, over a dozen black diamond-shaped objects suddenly flew out from the ground and landed on this black box. There was a violent explosion. The explosion at such a close distance only left a small dent on the black box. Back then, Huquan had used the radium-uranium steel to make the training room walls for the Myth 2 Mother of Bloodbath and the Myth 3 Endless Summer. 7017K. Chapter 1712. As long as Myth-breed phase paid attention, there was no problem at all in making a move in a house made of radium-uranium steel. Those diamond-shaped objects just now could blast a dent on the surface of radium-uranium steel. It was enough to prove the power of those attacks. After the Earth was reset, the source sand had really lost control of the surrounding environment. At that moment, the near-guard sand formed a vortex again. It swallowed the black box made of chain swords into the vortex. Then, a suppressed snake cry echoed in the quicksand vortex. Han Shi knelt on one knee on the floating earth snake's body. It was as if something in his mind had shattered, and his spiritual energy was in unbearable pain. As for Han Shi, the fetters between him and the Dark Bamboo Viper had completely disappeared. Phase could be said to be the lifeblood of a spirit Chi professional. The Dark Bamboo Viper's death immediately made Han Shi go crazy. At that moment, Lin Yuan was using Morbius True data to investigate the huge snake that Han Shi had summoned called the Floating Earth Snake. Fey name: Floating Earth Snake. Fey species: Ancient Giant Snake / Bright Snake. Fey grade: Diamond, 10 out of 10. Fey type: Earth. Fey quality: Fantasy V abilities: Frowny Face Drill Explosion. Compress the soil and sand in the earth to form an earth drill and then detonate it to deal damage to targets within the range. Snake's Pride: when attacked in a seriously injured state or suffering from negative effects or curses, one can cut off the snake's vitality to reduce one's size and heal injuries. Sand Flow Wild Attraction: by devouring the sand flow and absorbing the earth attribute energy in the sand flow, one can increase one's strength for a short time and build a layer of sand-like armor on the surface of one's body. Snake Queen's Guard: expel 3 snake eggs that are being nurtured in the abdomen. These 3 snake eggs can absorb earth element energy and hatch into snake guards with a bright snake bloodline and have the same combat power as the main body. Earth Reset: in an instant, all of the power within the earth is gathered together and then evenly distributed across a certain area of land. During this process, Any power that one can control can be extracted and added to one's self. Bright snake god. Burn one's own bloodline. Sacrifice one's own flesh. And under the premise of burning the false nucleus, one can temporarily break through to the next level. If the contestant is willing to sacrifice himself, one can break through to the next level. Exclusive skill frowny face earth vein control. Injecting one's bloodline into the earth, transforming the earth vein underground into a snake vein. The snake vein has a stronger defense than the user, and it can always be controlled by the user. Snake world floating. Opens up a gate to the snake world and draws in a large number of earth attribute wild snakes. While the main body is protecting an object, the main body can share its power with these wild snakes. Lin Yuan's face behind the mask revealed a surprised expression. Lin Yuan simply did not know what to say about this earthly bright snake. In a way, it was the strongest defense-type fantasy breed fae that Lin Yuan had ever seen. Moreover, this kind of defense also had extremely strong offensive power. The earth had just turned over, and the source sand had been banished to various places in this land. It must have been the earthly bright snake that had used its platinum ability, Earth Reset, the one that had just blasted a groove on the radium-uranium steel surface. It was the normal ability, Drill Explosion. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this earthly bright snake's second exclusive skill, Snake World Descent, was very compatible with the Class 5 artifact in Han Chi's hand, the Demon Lizard Fangblade. Each of the wild snakes that appeared in the gate to the snake world could be used as Han Chi's weapon and supply. The most powerful deterrent was the earthly bright snake's diamond ability, Bright Snake God. The bright snake divine connection allowed the bright snake of the floating world to burn its own bloodline and sacrifice its body. It could let its strength break through to the next level. If Han Chi was willing to sacrifice himself, it could let the earthly bright snake break through to the next grade. The double breakthrough could let the earthly bright snake's strength be comparable to that of a Myth 2 Fae in a short time. Such strength had already reached the level of the current Radiance Envoy. After Lin Yuan thoroughly saw the earthly bright snake's data, he did not have any fear. This was because he had used his sacred source life form, the sacred sword-wielding queen. When using the sword skills in the sacred sword state, he could also achieve such strength. Moreover, Lin Yuan's sacred source life form, the sacred sword-wielding queen, had now broken through to Class 4. It had obtained a new function. In the queen state, the function still had a support and defensive effect. However, in the sacred sword state, there was already a stronger killer move. However, Lin Yuan did not have the slightest fear of the earthly bright snake. This did not mean that the Chef Supreme, the Bamboo Monarch, the Moon Empress, or the other Class 4 creation masters were afraid. After understanding the earthly bright snake situation, there was no anxiety or worry on his face. Apart from the Moon Empress, the others did not understand Lin Yuan. Based on common sense, no matter how strong Lin Yuan was, he would not go head-on against a Myth 2 Fae. It had to be known that going head-on against a Myth 2 Fae and being able to hit with the same strength as a Myth 2 Fae were two completely different things. A Myth 2 attack would only take an instant. Every movement of a Myth 2 Fae had the powerful might of a Myth 2 Fae. During the Psi meeting, Lin Yuan had indeed used the sacred source life form to hit with power comparable to a Myth breed Fae. However, the earthly bright snake was one of the 7 supreme snake bloodlines. After its strength reached Myth 2, it would undoubtedly be able to fight above its grade again. Now, it seemed that Lin Yuan had made Han Chi lose a Fae and had the upper hand. According to the rules of the general slaying battle, one of the two sides must die in this duel. In other words, if Lin Yuan wanted to win and kill Han Chi, he had to face both Han Chi and the earthly bright snake sacrifice. Even an Emperor-class expert with a Myth 2 Fae would go crazy after Han Chi and the earthly bright snake sacrifice. He might also be dragged down with him. The Freedom Federation's concern for Lin Yuan was different. Upon seeing Han Chi's Fae, the Nether Bamboo Viper died. Yin Ling, Kai Hua, Yu Changjian, and even Xin Yu wore faint smiles on their faces. Only the white-haired boy, Lu O, frowned and was truly concerned about Han Chi. The enraged Han Chi raised his hand. Once again, he summoned a big fellow. This big fellow had a pair of huge wings on its back. As this huge fellow hissed, the sky turned completely dark. Thunder rumbled. After seeing this big fellow's true data, Lin Yuan also waved his hand. In the blink of an eye, millions of golden birds surged out from Lin Yuan's raised palm. In an instant, the golden birds were centered around Lin Yuan. It formed a grand scene of 100 birds paying homage. At that moment, 2 or 3 pipa strings sounded as though they came from beyond the sky. 7017K. Chapter 17:13. When Lin Yuan saw this snake species flying fey with huge golden wings, his eyes lit up. He didn't need to use Morbius true data to investigate. He knew that this snake fey must have the feathered serpent bloodline, one of the 7 supreme bloodlines of snakes. Compared to the soaring serpent bloodline that is Master, the Moon Empress, and the pure and white snakes that pulled the carriage, this feathered serpent bloodline was still very weak. Even so, this snake fey's feathered serpent bloodline had almost reached the limit of a snake-type fantasy breed fey. This giant snake was about 500 meters long. Its entire body was a brilliant golden blue. The golden and blue snake scales seemed to contain 2 kinds of power. On the dark golden snake eyes, there was a wing-like eyelid excrescence. The excrescence was hard and had a very strong sense of horniness. It gave this snake fey a majestic and sacred aura out of nowhere. This feathered serpent's tail was raised high, and it had the obvious characteristics of a rattlesnake. Its specialized tail tip was nearly 5 meters long. Every time the tail tip shook, a small snake that turned into a musical note would overflow from the tail tip and drill into the snake fey's head. It was as if it was drilling into the clouds. The giant snake flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Its body shuttled through the clouds, which became thicker and thicker. Heavy rain poured down in an instant. It drenched the 2 independent 100 sequence members and Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's hair and clothes were wet in the rain. The rain that fell on the silver mask slid down the streamlined end of the mask. It made Black look like a noble strolling in the rain. Under the rain, it didn't look the slightest bit disheveled. However, the 2 independent 100 sequence members seemed to have suffered an invisible attack. They were all squatting on the ground, hugging their heads, and trembling violently. It was as if they were suffering some kind of pain. It was the same for the fey summoned by the 2 independent 100 sequence members. That platinum/fantasy breed flood dragon fey was in pain. At this moment, he was in so much pain that he felt like a maggot, and he was struggling on the ground. The white jade ground had been destroyed. The rain had wet the ground, making it abnormally muddy. This silver-white flood dragon, fey, seemed to have become an earth-drilling loach. Its body was covered in mud and looked very disheveled. It was as if he had lost half his life after being drenched by the rain. Lin Yuan also sensed that this rain could launch a mental attack. Firstly, Genius Strength had already been raised to Diamond X/Fantasy V. Although Genius wasn't a snake species fey, its bloodline had evolved along the way. To some extent, the intelligence of the heavenly knowing destiny beast had evolved. It was more noble than any fey and bloodline that Lin Yuan knew of. It was even taller than the managing phoenix New Sun Sparrow, which had devoured Chinese phoenix bloodline and evolved into a sun independently. Genius represented the 100 questions beast race. After obtaining pure spirit chi, they would be qualified to walk on the path of a creation master. The path of a creation master was the standard to assist in the evolution of myriad spirits. A fey's innate talent possessed such an ability. Compared to the heavenly spirits, such a spiritual being was more worthy of being called the favored child of heaven and earth. Genius, which had advanced to Diamond X/Fantasy V, had no boundaries in its spirit sea. It could definitely target a peak, myth, 2 spiritual type fey. Therefore, under this drizzle that was harmful to one's mind, Through genius spiritual expansion, Lin Yuan was able to avoid the damage. Secondly, Lin Yuan had previously used the silver stamen gold luster cache's nectar to wash away the impurities in his body. After the silver stamen gold luster cache's strength had broken through, he had used the silver stamen gold luster cache's nectar to wash away the impurities in his soul. After consuming the geocentric immortal milk, Lin Yuan's genetic model had undergone an unknown evolution. To a certain extent, Lin Yuan could no longer be treated as a normal spirit qi professional. The process of washing away the impurities 3 times was more painful each time, especially when he used the geocentric immortal milk for the 3rd time. Lin Yuan experienced that every cell was torn apart and reconstructed. The pain repeated tens of thousands of times. This pain affected the soul, mind, and body. Therefore, without genius spiritual expansion, Lin Yuan could still resist under such a torrential rain. Even with Lin Yuan's mind, there would still be a huge burden. However, he would never be like the 2 independent 100 sequence members who held their heads and collapsed on the ground. There was no room for resistance at all. That giant snake with golden wings and golden blue scales. It continued to wander among the dark clouds. At that moment, the audience was appalled to discover something. The dark clouds in the sky had unknowingly gathered into an ink-blue sky river. Golden spirit snakes swam in the ink-blue sky river. As these spirit snakes swam, there was a strange sound. This sound seemed to contain some kind of power. However, it was not released. Seeing Lin Yuan in the rain, there was no change. Han Qi, who was in a frenzy, pursed his lips tightly. Han Qi did not expect such a situation to occur. His main fae had summoned a curtain of rain. To other spirit qi professionals, it had always been a great killing weapon. Han Qi thought in his heart, could it be that black has a spiritual type, defense type fae? Han Qi, who was speculating about black, did not know that his other main fae was brewing the sky river in the sky. His opponent, black, had already checked his fae's true data clearly. Fae name, Fan Yu Guanyin Snake, Fae species, Feathered Serpent / Sound Serpent, Fae grade, Diamond, 10 out of 10, Fae type, Sound / Water, Fae quality, Fantasy V abilities, Frowny Face Bell Tail. When the tail is swung, the sound can turn into a spirit snake and attack the designated target indiscriminately. After hitting the target, a snake-shaped mark will be formed on the target's body. Every 10 snake-shaped marks will trigger a sonic boom effect. Feather shadow protection. When the wings extend out a light shadow, it can protect itself or other targets. When a light shadow is damaged, the feathers can be consumed to increase the light shadow's strength. Sacrificial prayer snake voice. When attacking a target that is suffering a spiritual attack, each attack will sacrifice a certain amount of the target's vitality, spiritual power, spiritual energy, and soul power. The sacrificed power will be injected into the designated target's body. Guanyin weeping. The killing heart Guanyin statue weeps and forms a range of rain curtain. The snake-shaped musical notes can freely appear in the rain curtain or be condensed by the rain curtain. At the same time, the weeping Guanyin statue will spew out snake-shaped musical notes with double the attack power. Feathered serpent connection. By burning one's own bloodline and sacrificing one's body, one will protect a target under the premise of burning the false core. No matter what the target sacrifices, the sacrificial effect will be endured by the body. Sanskrit Heavenly Temple. Temporarily give up the feathered serpent bloodline and activate the sound serpent bloodline to the extreme. Through the snake-shaped musical notes, the killing heart Guanyin will sit in the heavenly temple. From then on, the killing heart Guanyin's hand will turn into a staff made of snake-shaped musical notes and attack the target. Exclusive skill, Frowny Face Killing Heart Guanyin. Through the snake-shaped musical notes, a Guanyin statue will be formed behind the user. The snake-shaped musical notes emitted from the Guanyin pure bottle will be twice as strong as the original snake-shaped musical notes. Torrential Milky Way. Condensed dark clouds in the sky, and the dark clouds will accumulate rain to form a Milky Way hanging in the sky. The Milky Way will gather water elements and be able to replenish the user's water element energy at any time and form a rain curtain with extreme spiritual attack power. The raindrops can put the opponent's spirit in extreme pain. 7017K. Chapter 1714. Through the feedback from true data, Lin Yuan knew. The anomaly in the sky was formed by the Fan Yu Guanyin snake executing its second exclusive skill, torrential Milky Way. As for the little golden snakes swaying in the Milky Way, they were the Fan Yu Guanyin snakes that were executing their spirit tail technique. If one were to say that the Yukio earth snake summoned by Han Chi could perfectly restrain his source sand, the Fan Yu Guanyin snake, which was also a sound-type fae like Chimey, happened to be restrained by Chimey. The Milky Way blocked out the sun. The sky darkened in front of Chimey. It was no different from covering the bonfire with a black cloth. Even though the heavenly river was thick and heavy, it was still formed by dark clouds. 100 layers of black cloth stacked on top of the bonfire could still be easily burned through by the bonfire. Han Chi stood on the body of the world, bright serpent under the heavenly river. He was like a king surrounded by thousands of snakes. Han Chi said angrily, "Black, you killed one of my main fays and destroyed my talent. I want you dead. Bright snake of the world. Snake world emerges. Fan Yu Guanyin snake. Use your Guanyin weeping tears. Kill this guy in front of me." As soon as Han Chi finished speaking, the Yukio earth snake's tail suddenly stabbed into the ground. A large number of dark red snake patterns appeared in the snake's body. These snake patterns swam in the air. In the end, a huge snake gate was formed behind the Yukio earth snake. Snake patterns swam on the snake gate, bringing with it a damp, fishy, and sinister aura. Suddenly, the huge stone door cracked open. A large number of 3 to 4 meters long dark brown snakes swarmed out from the snake door. Han Chi wielded the 5-star artifact, the demon lizard toothblade, and chopped down 5 to 6 wild snakes. The spiritual power that he had consumed was instantly replenished to a full state. In the sky, Fan Yu stabbed the tail of the Guanyin snake into the heavenly river. The snake tail shook rapidly, stirring up a huge whirlpool in the heavenly river. With the vortex as the center, a large number of spirit snakes formed by golden musical notes were released toward the heavenly river. Furthermore, the spirit snakes formed by the golden musical notes were much thicker than before. The rain was even heavier than before. Golden spirit snake notes flickered in the rain from time to time. It was as if the spiritual snake musical notes in the heavenly river could appear anywhere in the rain. Right at this moment, Han Chi heard the voice that he abnormally loathed ring out. "I remember your Freedom Federation saying that this is just a friendly match. I killed one of your main fays because it's inevitable to make mistakes in battle. I don't think you don't understand such a simple logic." Lin Yuan's words made Han Chi's teeth suddenly clench together. It made a creaking sound. This was the pretext that the Freedom Federation had prepared for this friendly battle long ago. Now, before he even had the chance to use it, someone else had used it on him. In Han Chi's opinion, this was truly a form of mockery. Seeing that Black didn't summon any other phase, Black nodded. Meanwhile, the curtain of rain formed by Guanyin's weeping tears had already reached Black. Han Chi sneered and shouted, "Understand, but I hope you can understand." Han Chi's voice had just faded when he heard that cold voice full of mockery. "You can't be thinking that with the ability that you've displayed now, you can determine victory, right? Chimey, the sky has been overcast for too long. It's time to see the sun." Lin Yuan's voice had just faded when the golden birds circling around Lin Yuan's body instantly took him as the origin. Out of nowhere, they increased by dozens of times. If it was previously a grand scene of 100 birds bowing to the ancestor, then it had now become 10,000 birds bowing to the ancestor. Among the tens of thousands of golden birds, there was a golden phoenix with a body length of 10 meters in every 1,000 golden birds. These 10 phoenixes constantly led the flock to circle around. It was as if they were looking forward to the arrival of their king. The pipa strings that had originally only sounded out 2 or 3 times immediately fluctuated. The sweet-sounding pipa sound seemed to make the heavy rain in the sky pause. In the rain, the musical notes turned into little golden snakes. All of them were picked up by the flying birds. Then, they were pecked into pieces by a few flying birds at the same time. At this moment, in the sky above Lin Yuan's head, a young girl's clear shout came. Immediately after, 10,000 birds bowed. The golden birds condensed into a three-string pipa that seemed to contain a new sun. This pipa's neck looked like a phoenix's neck. At this moment, the phoenix's neck was being gently pinched by a pair of hands. A young girl's shadow appeared in midair. This young girl's beauty was simply indescribable. The heavens seemed to favor this young girl's facial features. If an ordinary person was only sculpted 1,000 times, this young girl's facial features were definitely sculpted 10,000 times. This young girl was elegant and gentle, with vitality and charm. Her appearance was not inferior to even the Moon Empress and Lian Shun. However, at this moment, the members of the 100 Sequence and the Star Web audience were not surprised by this young girl's beauty. Instead, this young girl was simply carved from the same mold as the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess who had live-streamed on the Star Web previously. Back then, the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess looked far less like a Valkyrie than the current young girl. At that time, the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess looked like a pretty daughter from a humble family. Previously, the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess had appeared in the live-streaming room with a blue gold bird. That bird was Black's Fae at that time. This made everyone speculate that the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess should have a close relationship with Black. Otherwise, it was impossible for Black's Fae to be placed with the sparrow-voiced lowly goddess. But now, everything seemed to be self-evident. The sparrow-voiced lowly goddess should have been transformed from Black's bird Fae on the execution platform. Bai Hao looked at the woman's shadow in midair, who was holding a peepa with a phoenix neck and was surrounded by hundreds of birds. He was instantly stunned. For a moment, he could not help but have a myriad of thoughts. No one knew what Bai Hao was thinking at this moment. However, Wang Fan, who was standing beside Bai Hao, noticed that Bai Hao's teeth were tightly biting his lower lip. This was something that Bai Hao would only do when he was extremely nervous and worried. Bai Hao should be very worried about the safety of Black's bird Fae. The current chimey did not give the audience time to be surprised by its appearance and identity. Everyone saw the woman's shadow raise her hand and point at the sky. In an instant, the sun that was covered by the Milky Way bloomed with radiance. This radiance pierced through the Milky Way mercilessly. In less than a minute, it completely evaporated the Milky Way and the rain curtain. It was just like the Milky Way and the rain curtain, as well as the spirit snake shuttling through the rain curtain. It was as if they had never appeared. Before Han Chi could react, the young girl's pleasant voice rang out again. Immediately after, under everyone's astonished gaze, everyone saw that the sun in the phoenix neck peepa had actually flown out of the peepa itself. It gradually rose in this world. 7017K. Chapter 1715. The sun that flew out of the peepa constantly radiated golden light. The sun slowly hovered in midair and resonated with the sun in the sky. It was as though this sun was created by Chimy's ability and could borrow the power of the sun in the sky. Han Chi wouldn't believe such a situation even if he was beaten to death. If there was really a Fae that could create a sun by itself, wouldn't this Fae be even more powerful than a favorite spirit? The sun that Chimy had just risen looked too small. The Moon Empress, Chef Supreme, Bamboo Monarch, and the Pity God, although they noticed that this sun was a little special, they didn't pay too much attention. Instead, they mainly focused on Chimy itself. However, Xue Sha, who was hiding in Lin Yuan's hair, felt his heart tremble for no reason. As a favored spirit that belonged to the sun, Xue Sha could be said to be the most sensitive to the sun. The Moon Empress might be a Class 6 Creation Master now. Even her perception of the sun couldn't compare to Xue Sha. Xue Sha felt a kind of power that had the same origin as the main world sun. This discovery made Xue Sha look at Chimy in horror. It was no longer a question of whether he believed it or not. Right now, it was no longer a question of whether they believed him or not. After the sun rose into the sky, it immediately used Phoenix seed voice transmission. Chimey had fused the soul seed that it had refined from the phoenix phase soul into the soundbirds. Chimey had fused the soul seed that it had refined from the phoenix species phase soul into the soundbird's body. Immediately after, these phoenixes flapped their wings and welcomed the floating earth snake. Through the exclusive skill, Snake World Floating, a total of 18 golden phoenixes were singing in front of Chimey. Then, these phoenixes flapped their wings and welcomed the floating earth snake. Each of the golden phoenixes, transformed from musical notes, was surrounded by hundreds and thousands of soundbirds. These flying birds were formed by Chimey's ordinary ability, Phoenix Cry. After each golden flying bird hit the target, it had an extremely powerful penetrating effect. At the same time, the target wasn't killed by the bird-shaped Phoenix Cry. It would intimidate and interfere with the target. When the flying birds were attacked or blocked, they would split into even more flying birds. The wild snakes that crawled out of the Snake World door were tested by the golden flying birds. His strength was between the gold, platinum, and diamond levels. Seeing a large number of berserk snakes crawling out of the gate of the Snake World being killed, Hanshi knew that he had to bring out some real ability. The Fan Yuguanine snake was obviously restrained by the spiritual creature that Black had summoned. Therefore, the best way to deal with this Fae was to control the floating earthly bright snake to attack. Hanshi immediately activated the second effect of Snake Realm Floating World. All of a sudden, a dark brown light burst forth from the earthly snake's body. Then, the Ukiyo earth snake's body coiled up, petrified into a stone tablet. The power of the land snake of the floating world was distributed to each of the wild snakes. These wild snakes instantly changed from gold to diamond and platinum. They became gold fantasy breed, platinum fantasy breed, and diamond fantasy breed. This meant that his overall strength had risen to a whole new level. As a result, the golden birds were no longer able to effectively attack the snakes. Only the musical note phoenixes that were produced by Chimey's Phoenix Seed Induction skill were left behind. Only then would he be able to continue killing the berserk snake. Originally, the berserk snakes that came out of the Snake World's door used physical attacks. At that moment, a large group of dark brown giant snakes with blood patterns squeezed out of the Snake World's door with difficulty. As soon as these giant snakes appeared, they spewed out a large amount of poisonous fog and set off a sandstorm in the arena. At that moment, the sandstorm seemed to only be able to blind one's vision. However, the sand and dust were highly toxic, and they could be blown onto flesh and blood. The sand was as sharp as a blade, and it could easily grind away flesh. Chimey rarely had the chance to help Lin Yuan fight. After its bloodline metamorphosis, it had never fought before. Now that its bloodline had evolved, it was the first time it had helped Lin Yuan fight, and it was already being obstructed. Chimey automatically cast its skill, Fallen New Sunday. The sun that Chimey had just risen suddenly descended and smashed on the general execution platform. It formed a huge area that was 200 square meters in size. The ground in this area seemed to have formed the surface of the sun. The sand that the giant snakes stirred up was unable to blow into the sun's area. It had already melted into magma. The new fallen sun allowed Chimey to be immune to most physical and elemental damage. Chimey used its exclusive skill, Twin Sun Fetters, to communicate with the sun in the sky. It started to sing and communicate with the sun in the sky. It borrowed a trace of energy from the main world's sun to replenish its consumption of the sun's area. After doing all of this, Chimey cast a new sun body skill. The phantom formed by musical notes landed on the ground and stepped into the sun's area. The light-type musical notes that formed Chimey's body instantly transformed into fire-type musical notes. Chimey's aura suddenly changed. Lin Yuan knew that Chimey had already transformed from the managing phoenix's new sun sparrow into the untamed Sanskrit sparrow. The golden birds that were originally flying in the sky instantly turned crimson. These crimson birds were like fire seeds. When they stuck onto the bodies of these wild snakes, they would immediately ignite. However, these fires wouldn't be extinguished. Soon enough, a monstrous fire burned within the snake horde. Even the few giant snakes that had squeezed out of the snake world's door with great difficulty were burned to ashes. Under the fire seeds, they were burned to ashes. Chimey changed its attack. Han Chi didn't stop either. Han Chi controlled the floating earth snake and used its quicksand mad guide. By devouring a large amount of sand, its aura rose. It formed a thick layer of sand armor on its body. The floating earth snake, which was carrying out such a defense, didn't care that the flames had spread to its body. This was because this hollow layer of sand armor could effectively help the floating earth snake isolate the heat of the flames. The floating earth snake flicked its tail. In an instant, 3 snake eggs were expelled from the floating earth snake's body. These 3 snake gallbladders absorbed the earth-type energy under its feet. Soon enough, 3 snake men with 8 arms drilled out of the snake eggs. Each of these snake men held a weapon made of black crystals. These black crystals were very similar to the crystals that appeared when the floating earth snake used its drill explosion. The floating earth snake had hatched these 3 snake men according to its Queen's Guard skill. Every one of them had the aura of a Diamond X/Fantasy V. Just this skill alone allowed the floating earth snake to fight against 4 enemies. Although it wasn't as flexible as the mother of Bloodbath Monster Trainer's exclusive skill, External Bloodbone. However, the bright snake of the floating world was able to control the 3 snake guards through simple commands. The snake guards rushed toward Chimey. 7017K. Chapter 1716. At that moment, the floating earth snake was constantly expanding the snake world's door. From time to time, more and more wild snakes drilled out. Most of the wild snakes that drilled out had area of effect elemental attacks. At that moment, Black raised its fist and faced the 3 Emperor's personal guards. It actually relied on a kind of combat technique and movement technique that Han Chi could not understand. It used its physical body to clash head-on with the 3 Empress personal guards. The wild snake's elemental attacks landed on Black's body. For some reason, Black was immune to the nether bamboo viper's venom. It was actually immune to the elemental attacks that could kill ordinary B-rank spirit chi professionals countless times. This made Han Chi very puzzled. At the same time, Han Chi understood. On the Freedom Federation's side, apart from Kaihua, Yin Ling, and Yu Changjian, they had also set up a hidden trump card. It was definitely the same for the Radiance Federation. Black was the hidden trump card that the Radiance Federation had kept. Right now, Black's Fae that could control the Redbird was present. His Sanskrit Guanine snake was restrained. The Sanskrit Guanine snake used its water attribute ability to face Black's Fae. For some reason, it had lost its effectiveness. Han Chi did not want to activate his sacred source life form. He summoned the demon that he had spent so much effort to get from Doom Yaomian. If he used all his trump cards in the first match of the General Slaying Battle, wouldn't he have no chance to kill the Radiance 100 sequence members? Previously, he had promised Qianyu that he would definitely kill all 3 Radiance 100 sequence members. At that thought, Han Chi issued a command to the Sanskrit Guanine snake in the sky. Use the ability Sanskrit Temple, and then use the exclusive skill Killing Heart Guanine. When the Sanskrit Guanine snake heard the command, it flapped its wings and let out a violent hiss. The snake tail swayed and left afterimages. A large number of golden snake patterns flew into the sky and outlined the outline of a temple. At that moment, a benevolent-looking Guanine appeared in the temple. As the golden snake patterns increased, the Guanine became more and more solid. The Guanine suddenly opened its eyes, which contained endless killing intent. The 2 pure bottles in his hands had turned into a Buddhist staff at this time. The huge Guanine swooped down from the sky. He raised his staff and smashed it at Chimey. This strike could be said to be the Sanskrit Guanine snake's all-out strike. It had already surpassed the limit of Diamond X/Fantasy V. At this time, Black seemed to be in a stalemate with the 3 snake guards. He was completely powerless to resist this Guanine that descended from the sky. As for the Crimson Female Phantom, she was constantly fighting against the Berserk Snake. It was obvious that he had used up more than half of his spiritual power. Lin Yuan was naturally aware of the situation. Each of Chai's attacks relied on its own consumption of spirit qi. As for Han Chi's floating world earth snake, its strength was almost the same as Chai. However, it could devour the yellow sand to recover the energy and spiritual energy it had consumed. He used his exclusive skill, Snake World Floating, and opened the door to the snake world. These wild snakes had crawled out of the snake world. No matter how much damage it suffered, it wouldn't affect the floating world earthly snake at all. If Chai went up, it would strike out its strongest attack. If Han Chi wanted to block it, he could only reveal more trump cards. However, in a stalemate, Chai was indeed not Han Chi's match. Lin Yuan didn't want to waste any more time. He didn't want to open the Spirit Chi imprint and Life imprint when fighting Han Chi. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. Lin Yuan's plan wasn't so small that he had to fight a second match. He had to kill another Independent 100 sequence member. Before the start of each general slaying battle, both sides could set the requirements again. If Han Chi requested, the Spirit Chi professionals in the battle were not allowed to leave the venue in any way. Lin Yuan wasn't confident that the floating world Earth Snake would use its bright snake divine connection. It had to protect the Independent 100 sequence members on his side. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to end the general slaying battle in this battle. Lin Yuan ordered Genius in his heart. Genius used Cat's Embrace. After Lin Yuan gave the order, the Starweb viewers suddenly realized something. Behind Black, 8 dazzling, illusory tails suddenly appeared. Each of the 8 tails was nearly 100 meters long. These 8 tails intertwined with Black and the snake guards in a stalemate. They faced the killing heart Guanyin in the sky that was holding the Buddha staff. These cat tails were very similar to the spirit cat Phantom's tail that appeared behind Black during the duel with Lu Xuan. Black didn't summon a Fey and only used its phase ability. It looked like it was in a dilemma and had no choice but to parry. Everyone thought that the cattails would break under the Buddha staff. These cattails that didn't seem to have much combat power directly sent the killing heart Guanyin flying. Moreover, these 8 cattails didn't stop attacking after sending the killing heart Guanyin flying. These 8 cattails bloomed in the air. It was like a white peony. In the middle of the peony, an attack brood with spiritual energy was shot out. Genius's attack didn't belong to Genius itself. Genius used its cat's embrace ability to cluster a Fey called the Silver Crystal Feline. It used the Silver Crystal Feline's ability, the Spiritual Destruction Silver Bullet. For this attack, Genius used its own spiritual energy. With just one attack, it completely shattered the killing heart Guanyin. At that moment, Lin Yuan also released the spirit essence that was originally suppressed at 80% to 10%. After a few punches, half of the 8 arms of the snake guard, which was caught off guard, were broken. 2 of the Independent 100 sequence candidates were kneeling on the ground, shivering. Even the top prodigies of the Freedom Federation. They weren't mentally prepared for the possibility of losing or dying. Now, the strength that Black displayed. Let these 2 Independent 100 sequence members know. Regardless of whether Han Chi could kill Black or not, he would definitely use the 2 of them as scapegoats before he died. Han Chi saw that the situation was already out of his control. He gritted his teeth, and suddenly his eyes changed. The original white of his eyes turned black. His black eyeballs turned white, and his vertical pupils turned white. In the vertical pupils, there was a depraved and oppressive purple light. The bones in Han Chi's tall and straight body suddenly made a violent sound. Han Chi's skin slowly turned grayish-black. A pair of long black horns appeared on his head. These horns were different from any other Fey's horns. These 2 horns spiraled upward. They were the unique long horns of the devil in the Devil Cathedral of the Freedom Federation. These 2 long horns proved that he was a middle-rank devil. Lin Yuan knew that Han Chi was now. He had finally used his trump card in a true sense. And the collision that would decide life and death was about to officially begin. 7017K. Chapter 1717. At present, Lin Yuan was also weighing his trump card. Currently, he had the following phase: Genius, Chimey, Red Thorn, Source Sand, Ethereal Jellyfish, Jasmine Lily, and Little Black. Purple Cloud, Soul Thought Whale. For example, Jinsei, Silver Splendor, or the Apostles Windy and Lizard Tongue. These fays that were in dimensional spaces or other continents definitely couldn't be casually revealed. Lin Yuan did not mind revealing his trump card in this battle against the Freedom Federation's envoy. However, it did not mean that he had to bring those trump cards that were not helpful in battle to the table. For example, Red Thorn used its Tongue of Relinquish to control a few Overlord-class weapons. Or perhaps Bai Yin, who believed that he was the ruler and had submitted to him. These were the powers that Lin Yuan had mastered. But to others, this kind of power seemed too much like an external force. The two majesties of the Freedom Federation would definitely not approve of his display of power. According to Xue Shaw, 2 pages of the Pagoda Canon had come to Hui Yao. The strange plant seeds and plants that made Red Thorn's Tongue of Relinquish came from the Pagoda Canon. It was definitely not something simple. He did not want the Tower Cannon to target him. Among the fays that he could use now, Genius, Chimey, Red Thorn, and the Sorsan were the only ones he could use. They had more or less been used. However, Red Thorn and Genius had only revealed a little of their strength. Lin Yuan had heard his master, the Moon Empress, mention the devils of the Freedom Federation. He had a certain level of understanding. He knew that the devil wasn't like the desolate bloodline phase that could be summoned. Instead, he would fuse with the contractor and demonize the contractor, obtain the power of the devil. It was very similar to those fays that could fuse with their hosts. When he had first learned about demons, he had asked his master, the Moon Empress, what was the difference between a demon and a fey that could possess a contractor? Back then, the Moon Empress' answer was to fuse the fey with the contractor, and the contractor would still be the main one. On the other hand, when a devil possessed a contestant, the devil would be the dominant one. As he spoke, Lin Yuan could tell. His master, the Moon Empress, was rather fearful of creatures like devils. It was as though a spirit chi professional strength would undergo a drastic change after being possessed by a devil. Lin Yuan was rather surprised that Han Chi could contract a middle-rank devil. The devils in the Devil Cathedral were the same as the Desolate Bloodline phase. There weren't many of them. The Desolate Bloodline spiritual item could only be given to His Highness Disciple, and the Radiance Envoy. Members of the Radiant Light Knights could only be promoted if they had made great contributions. Only then would they be bestowed with a Desolate Bloodline spiritual object. The Freedom Federation had many people favored by His Majesty. Every single one of Her Majesty's caretakers had a single devil. That was simply unrealistic. Only those of the younger generation who were favored by His Holiness and whose status was equivalent to His Holiness Hui Yao's disciples. Only then would he have the chance to be bestowed the devil. The fact that Han Chi could be bestowed with a devil was enough to show Han Chi's status. A devil was more precious than a sacred source life form. For example, during the Dimensional Conference, one could obtain an uncontracted sacred source life form as a reward. However, it was impossible for him to use a Desolate Bloodline Fey as a reward. Hence, Han Chi must also have a sacred source life form. After measuring Han Chi's strength, Lin Yuan knew that Han Chi's strength was very strong. His sacred source life form, the sword-wielding queen, he definitely had to use it. While Han Chi was transforming into a devil, he was thinking about how to kill Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was thinking about how to expose another Fey. And when he did not use the sword-wielding queen's new ability, he would obtain victory in the general slaying battle. It could be said that after the previous few clashes, Lin Yuan, who had roughly figured out Han Chi's path, knew that the floating world Bright Snake had the Bright Snake divine ability. When Han Chi and the floating world Bright Snake both sacrificed themselves, he would be facing an opponent whose strength could reach Myth 2 in a short period of time. He still did not have the slightest fear or worry. He now had a total of 6 sword skills in the Sacred Sword state. If Lin Yuan was given another day, the 7th sword skill could also be formed. Among them, a few world crystals came from the Miao family. Miao Zhinshan had been killed by the Void Shadow Demon in the final Blood Oath Extreme battle. Back then, Lin Yuan had not chosen to make Miao Zhunshan into an Emperor-class weapon. First, it was because there was only one red tongue of relinquished tip left. Lin Yuan had to reserve this spot. He would leave it for more important targets. Second, Lin Yuan had his eyes on Miao Zhunshan's spiritual type, Main Fei, the golden eerie Dreamweaver's world crystal. He would then absorb this world crystal, which had 8 creation earth veins, and was one step away from forming an immortal body. Lin Yuan could already use this sword skill to hit the limit of a myth-breed Fei. If Lin Yuan was willing to use this attack, he would not be able to kill the floating world Bright Snake, which had reached Myth 2 under the double sacrifice. He would definitely be able to touch the Freedom Envoy, Qianyu. Since it was a sacred source life form, the sacred sword-wielding queen could no longer hide it. Lin Yuan raised his hand, and a holy sword with a gorgeous hilt and a simple blade appeared in his hand. This was the second time His Holiness Hui Yao, Lu Jie, Zhongzhe, and the others saw Lin Yuan use his own sacred source life form. However, this time, Lin Yuan's back was not like when he had fought with Zhongzhe. A woman's phantom appeared behind him. This was probably because he was facing Han Qi. Lin Yuan did not need to activate the functions related to that woman's phantom. Zhongzhe, who had fought with Lin Yuan before, keenly noticed. Originally, only the tip of this sacred sword was engraved with fine totems. Now, this sacred sword had an additional sword tassel. The sword tassel was very elegant, and when the wind blew, it brushed past Lin Yuan's wrist. This elegant sword tassel was woven with some strange method. This weaving method seemed to be doing its best to protect something hidden. Han Qi had been completely possessed by the devil. Han Qi's spirit Qi clothes had been completely pierced by the bone horns that grew out from within his skin. To a certain extent, devils and the abyss dimensional life forms, demons, had some similarities in appearance. However, demons' power tended to focus on the physical body. Devils, on the other hand, had the power to corrupt the soul and the mind. Han Qi's legs had already become 5 or 6 snake tails that rubbed against each other and constantly wrapped around each other. His hands were covered with a layer of grayish-purple scales. His fingertips had become even sharper and longer than the demon lizard Fongblade's dagger. Han Qi's gray vertical pupils within the sclera of his black eyes were staring at him with exceptional calmness. Lin Yuan used Morbius True Data to investigate Han Qi. Lin Yuan was shocked to find that, since the devil was hidden in Han Qi's body, Morbius True Data did not have the ability to see through it. It was like inspecting a mother beast, even if this mother beast was about to give birth. Morbius couldn't see through the void mother's stomach to see what was inside. Therefore, Lin Yuan could not see this devil's attributes. Chapter 17-18. Since that was the case, Lin Yuan, who was holding the sacred sword, did not act immediately. Han Qi had already merged with the middle-rank devil that he had contracted. This devil had an appearance similar to a snake. It would definitely be a good match with Han Qi's snake phase. Han Qi would eventually have to use this ability. Lin Yuan planned to see what kind of ability this middle-rank devil had. Then, he would decide which sword skill to use. Sword skills had different targets. If used according to the situation, it could often have unexpected effects. Han Qi's voice was obscure and harsh. However, if one listened carefully, it would sound abnormally pleasant. It was as if the devil was whispering in one's ear in the dead of night. Black, I just used the devil, and you used your sacred source life form. I originally planned to kill you in the 3rd round, but I've changed my mind. Have you heard that devils can see through people's hearts? Upon hearing that, the corners of Lin Yuan's mouth curled up behind a mask. Whether a devil can see through people's hearts depends on whether this devil has the ability. But I can indeed see through what you're thinking in your heart. The side effect of the Bright World Earth Snake's diamond ability, Bright Snake Divine Connection, is irreversible. I think you're not willing to use it either. Lin Yuan's words caused Han Qi's expression to change drastically. After fighting for so long, it could be said that Han Qi had a vague impression of the opponent he was facing. His main Fei, the Bright World Earth Snake, could restrain that Sand-type, Source-type life form. However, he did not expect this sand-type, source-type life form to be able to precipitate steel from it. Steel was a metal-type power, and the metal type was not a variant of the earth type. Therefore, the bright world earth snake had no way to control it. This made it so that he had to protect the two independent 100 sequence members. He had lost the dark bamboo viper. Now that the sand-type source-type life form had no effect, Black had summoned it to his feet. It formed a protective belt under his feet. This sand was the main body of those sand elemental source-type life forms. The bright world earth snake could control the source sand and use the earth type among the elements. However, it could not hinder the source sand from moving. Just now, in the battle with the snake guards that had hatched from the Ukiyo land snake, the source sand had protected Black a lot. He blocked the joint slash of the snake guard's 8 arms and the impact from the drill explosion of the weapon in his hand. Unless the floating world bright serpent kept using the skill Great Earth Remold. Otherwise, the source sand would stay by Black's side to protect him. However, Earth's Retribution was an AoE control skill. The pressure on Ukiyo was quite heavy. Even if he had a recovery method, Han Chi could not easily use it. After that, Black summoned the shadow of a woman formed by a golden bird. He was still standing beside Black. However, Han Chi was still unable to determine the nature of this Fae until now. He was unable to determine this Fae species. Han Chi kept having the feeling that this female phantom was very similar to the killing heart guanine that the Sanskrit guanine snake condensed from snake-shaped musical notes. If that was the case, after fighting for so long, he had not even forced out the Fae's main body. The 8 cattails that suddenly appear behind Black had already retracted. However, these 8 cattails undoubtedly belonged to a Fae. This Fae's ability was used by a spirit chi professional. He was able to shatter the Sanskrit guanine snake's all-out attack. This made Han Chi feel an abnormally huge pressure. Moreover, Black still had a plant Fae that had performed outstandingly in the Radiance 100 sequence selection that had not been used. Apart from that, Black had used some unknown method. It was able to see through his Fae's ability. In a battle between spirit chi professionals, the most terrifying thing was the exposure of Fae's abilities and exclusive skills. Han Chi did not know that Black could see through his Fae's abilities and exclusive skills. It was because Black was a Class 4 or above Creation Master. Or was it because one of Black's Faes had a detection ability? No matter which one it was, Han Chi's heart had been possessed by the devil. The sense of security that he had felt was completely gone. Han Chi let out an angry roar. It was as though he wanted to roar away the uneasiness in his heart. Immediately after, a purple snake-shaped ring appeared out of nowhere on Han Chi's left ring finger. After this purple snake-shaped ring appeared, he immediately felt the aura of a sacred source life form. He knew that this ring should be the same as the Sacred Pursuit Sword and Gao Feng's memory-eating music box before they had been fused. They were all artifact-type, sacred source life forms. He checked the snake-shaped ring. He found that it was called the Oath Revolving Snake Ring. It was a dark-type, sacred source life form with the function of snake's love. Snake's love, subjective creation of a love concept that treats snakes as wives. In this state, the snake Fae's strength and ability can be transferred to oneself. The deeper the love, the higher the ability after the transfer. This kind of amplification due to love cannot be eliminated through any effects before the love is destroyed. After seeing the Oath Revolving Snake Ring's ability, Lin Yuan could not help but feel that his worldview was a little distorted. What a pervert! But to be honest, a sacred source life form like the Oath Revolving Snake Ring seemed to be quite suitable for Duan He. Even if Duan He could not contract the sacred source life form, the Oath Revolving Snake Ring would still be a good choice. If he was lucky enough to hold the artifact made from the Oath Revolving Snake Ring, his strength should be greatly enhanced. Moreover, Duan He was a henpecked man and had true love with Ziyao. With the artifact made from the Oath Revolving Snake Ring, Ziyao no longer had to worry about Duan He cheating. The sacred source life form, Oath Revolving Snake Ring, was a pinnacle class 3-star life form. Lin Yuan did not feel that it was strange. It had to be known that Zhongzai's sacred source life form had only been promoted to Class 4 at the Dark Knight Assembly a few months ago. Furthermore, everyone had different priorities when it came to improving their strength. Lin Yuan, for example, had not placed his golden wing of the Desolation bloodline Fei within the scope of his strength. This was because the golden wing's strength had just been promoted to gold. It would be instantly killed once it was pulled out. Lin Yuan was a typical example of not pouring resources into the Desolation bloodline Fei. The main reason Lin Yuan had done this was to be able to give the golden wing the most optimal evolution method. If the golden wing only wanted to eat dragon liver, it would eat the dragon liver of the main dragon species Fei. If it wanted to drink phoenix blood, it would drink the phoenix blood of the main phoenix species Fei. Although Lin Yuan did not know what the ability of Han Qi, a middle-rank demon, was. However, Lin Yuan had basically grasped Han Qi's trump card. The sacred sword in Lin Yuan's hand made a sword flower. Then, the sacred sword suddenly turned a pure white color. The originally simple, sacred sword bloomed with dazzling holy light. An aura that far exceeded that of a fantasy breed suddenly erupted on the general execution stage. Below the stage, Lien Shen suddenly exclaimed, "A pinnacle myth 2 phase attack. Why does it contain the smell of the world?" Chapter 17:19. The Goddess of Compassion's voice was very loud. It was immediately heard by Han Qi, who was on the stage. When the Moon Empress heard the Goddess of Compassion's words, she immediately snorted. She said in a deep voice, "Concubine Lien, the younger generation of our two major federations are having a showdown. Don't think that you're the only one who can feel the strength of the attack." The Goddess of Compassion pursed her lips, knowing that she was in the wrong. The Goddess of Compassion did not argue with the Moon Empress. She was just surprised to see Black brandishing the pure, white holy sword. One must know that the strength of an attack was not the most important thing. In a battle between experts, the realm of an attack was more important. The attack of a peak myth 2 Fei had the aura of a creation seed. It was really unusual. This attack with the aura of the world collided with the myth 2 attack. That aura of the world allowed her attack to gain the upper hand in the collision. After Black unleashed this attack, the sky turned dark. The Goddess of Compassion's gaze no longer fell on Han Qi. In the Goddess of Compassion's eyes, Han Qi was basically equivalent to a dead person. The Goddess of Compassion could not be bothered to put any attention on a dead person. The Goddess of Compassion's words seemed to be a reminder to Han Qi. The Goddess of Compassion's words were actually a reminder to Han Qi. The Goddess of Compassion had revealed the strength of Black's attack. If Han Qi wanted to fight against it, there was only one way. That was to sacrifice. Only by performing a sacrifice would Han Qi have a chance of blocking this attack. Otherwise, only death would await him. With that thought, Han Qi gritted his teeth. He looked at Black, who was holding the pure, white, holy sword, with grief and indignation. His eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. Black had just used the Bright Snake's ability, Bright Snake Divine. Thinking about it, he should have a certain understanding of the effects of Bright Snake Divine. However, through the sacred source life form's oath around the snake ring, he had absorbed all the main phase strength into his body. The strength that he had displayed was far from what the Bright Snake's main body could compare to when it used Bright Snake Divine. He had fused with the snake bone Fear Ghost. His physique was already so strong that it was shocking. If Han Qi had originally absorbed the power of the Bright Snake and the Sanskrit Guanyin snake, it would have been difficult. Now, with the strength of Han Qi's physical body, he could easily control these two forces to fight. Han Qi planned to go all out and fight for a sliver of a chance to survive. According to the Bright Snake Divine ability, he wanted the Bright Snake of the floating world to reach its peak state. He also needed to sacrifice himself. That was the only way for the Bright Serpent of the floating world to make another breakthrough after breaking through a grade. It could be said that once this skill was used, no matter what the final outcome was, he and the Yukio D Mingshi would definitely die. However, the Sanskrit Guanyin snake's skill, Feathered Serpent God, It could allow the Sanskrit guanine snake to burn its own bloodline and sacrifice its own body. Protect the target. It didn't matter what kind of sacrifice the target was making. The final result of the sacrifice was borne by the Sanskrit guanine snake. Right now, Han Shi planned to absorb the Sanskrit guanine snake to keep himself alive, as long as he could win this general execution battle. Even if he had truly become a cripple, he had still protected the glory of the Freedom Federation. At that time, he would definitely receive preferential treatment. In fact, the Majesties might even think of a way to recover themselves. At the thought of this, Han Shi, who had clearly chosen to abandon his two snake species phase, suddenly changed his mind. She looked at the Ukiyo di Ming snake and the Sanskrit guanine snake affectionately. Immediately after, the sacred source life form's oath-surrounded snake rings effect, snake's love, activated. The power of the Sanskrit guanine serpent and the Ukiyo earthly bright serpent surged into the body of the devilized Han Shi. At the same time, the Ukiyo land snake used its bright snake connection skill. Han Shi also sacrificed himself, but under the protection of the Sanskrit guanine snake's skill, feathered serpent god. Han Shi, who had sacrificed his physical body, was still standing on the back of the bright snake of the world unscathed. Both the motionless earth serpent and the Sanskrit guanine serpent hissed in pain. The bodies of the Sanskrit guanine snake and the Ukiyo earthbright snake were disappearing bit by bit. The two snake phase souls were also constantly dissipating under the burning. In the end, only Han Chi himself was left on Han Chi's side. The two huge snake phase had already disappeared. Lin Yuan was aware of this situation. It should be the snake demon that had possessed Han Chi. It had a special ability. Otherwise, even if the motionless earth serpent and the Sanskrit guanine snake sacrificed themselves, in a short period of time, their physical bodies would not perish so thoroughly. Han Chi raised the Class 5 treasure artifact, the demon lizard fawn blade. It merely swung forward. Those wild snakes that were burning with flames were all killed by Han Chi's attack. These wild snakes' vitality and spiritual power were quickly replenished into Han Chi's body through the treasure artifact, the demon lizard fawn blade. At that moment, 13 carriages suddenly flew out of Lin Yuan's pure white sacred sword. After these 13 carriages flew out of the pure white sacred sword, they kept galloping in the sky. Unbeknownst to them, 13 Valkyries' bodies formed by holy light suddenly appeared on the carriage. These Valkyries wore armor and had cloaks that fluttered behind them for nearly 100 meters. As the carriages ran around, they suddenly pulled out the sword at their waist. In an instant, a rain of light sprinkled from the sky. Lin Yuan raised the sacred sword and used his unparalleled movement technique to quickly approach Han Chi. Han Chi also twisted the 5 or 6 snake tails that were intertwined behind it. Like an arrow that had left the bow, it attacked Lin Yuan. When it got close, it was about to engage in close combat. Han Chi's grayish-black vertical pupils suddenly expanded. It directly burst the corners of Han Chi's eyes. It caused Han Chi's originally jujube-sized eyes to suddenly become the size of eggs. The black whites of his eyes were stained with blood. It carried a hint of malevolence and coquettishness. Han Chi's vertical pupils, which had been enlarged by 4 times, seemed to have turned into a beautiful snake that was constantly twisting its body and seducing Lin Yuan. This was the unique charm aura of a devil. It was enough to lead a strong-willed person to fall into the bottomless hell. They would become a chess piece that the devil had conquered and played with in the palm of his hand. Han Chi used the snake devil's impurity power to try his best to seduce it. It indeed caused Lin Yuan's mind to tremble slightly, even though Lin Yuan's mind was already extremely firm. However, Han Chi's charm and seduction made Morbius spontaneously use its passive ability, Calm Mind, as Morbius' strength continued to increase. At that moment, Morbius had become a Gold X/Fantasy V Fae. Through Calm Mind, Lin Yuan could be immune to most negative effects. It had to be known that when Morbius was Silver X/Fantasy V, This would allow him to remain conscious when the strange plant seed entered his body. Han Chi originally thought that Black would be under his control. In the worst-case scenario, Black's sword-swinging speed would slow down. However, Han Chi was wrong. 7017K. Chapter 1720. Not only was Black not controlled by him, but it did not even slow down. He used the pure white sword in his hand to clash with his Class 5 treasure, Lizard Snake Blade. Han Chi staked everything on one throw. Through the sacred source life form, Oath encircling Snake Ring, Black had absorbed his 2 snake phase. He had also used the Snake Devil's ability to absorb the bodies of his 2 phase. Subsequently, he had increased his physical strength and strength. Now, a casual attack from Han Chi had the might of a pinnacle Myth 2 Fey. The strength of his physical body was equivalent to the sum of a middle-rank Abyss Devil, the floating Earth Snake, and the Sanskrit Guanyin Snake. Han Chi thought that after the clash with Black Sword, he would have the upper hand. He did not expect that Black Sword was not as simple as he had imagined. After the first clash, Han Chi brandished his saber 3 times. He struck the sacred sword in Black's hand 3 times. The attacks forced Black to retreat repeatedly. However, Han Chi had not yet enjoyed the feeling of having the upper hand. Out of the 13 Valkyries in the sky, 4 of them suddenly flew down. They pulled out their long swords and slashed at themselves. Han Chi's sacred source life form and the middle-rank Abyss Devil Snakebone Fear Ghost were all Dark-type existences. The light attribute had a strong restraining effect on him. Han Chi realized that even if he used the Demon Lizard Snake Blade to slice these 4 Valkyries into pieces, before the light attribute energy completely dissipated, the light elements would continue to condense into the Valkyries' appearances and attack him. Han Chi calculated that he had to slice the Valkyries in half 3 times before the Valkyries would dissipate. Han Chi calculated that the 4 Valkyries that flew down should be because he had clashed with Black's sword 4 times. It was probably because he had touched the sword in Black's hand 4 times. Back then, if he had slashed 13 times in a row, he was afraid that he would be attacked by the 13 Valkyries now. At that moment, Han Chi saw Black coming up to meet him. Han Chi wanted to use his combat skills to prevent the Demon Lizard Tooth Blade from colliding with Black's pure white sacred sword. However, Black seemed to see through his actions. Every strike landed squarely on his Demon Lizard Tooth Blade. The Valkyries, circling in the sky, all flew down. The arena seemed to have become a training ground for the 13 Valkyries of Light. After several collisions, Lin Yuan, who had retreated to the back, realized that his hands were shaking. It was very difficult to hold the holy sword in his hand, if he hadn't been using the Lily to heal his arm. After these few clashes with Han Chi, Lin Yuan's bones would probably shatter into dust. Lin Yuan knew that unless he executed more sword skills, he would not be able to defeat Qin Feng. Otherwise, if they fought head-on, they would definitely not be Han Chi's match. There was a time limit for Han Chi to fuse with the devil and increase his strength through the bright snake divine connection. Every minute and every second was exceptionally precious to Han Chi. And now, Han Chi was being held up by this sword technique of his, the Martial God's Protection Strike. Martial God's Protection Strike was a defensive sword technique. In battle, every time he was attacked by an enemy, he would receive help from the Valkyrie. Before the Valkyrie ran out of energy, she suffered no damage. They would not dissipate. Of course, being attacked would consume the light energy in the Valkyrie's body. Of the 13 Valkyries, 2 had been killed by Han Chi. The light on the 6 Valkyries became dimmer and dimmer. On the other hand, Han Chi's attacks also became fiercer and fiercer, becoming more and more violent. Han Chi knew very well that the time he could fuse with the Snakebone Fear Ghost was limited to 3 minutes. The Bright Snake Divine Connections effect was also around 4 minutes. This meant that he would start fusing with the Devil Snake. He had to end the battle within 3 minutes. He used the Sacred Source Life Form to surround the Oath Snake Ring. He absorbed the Myth 2 Fey that the Bright Snake of the Floating World had obtained through the Bright Snake Divine Connection into his body. He was relying on the strong physique he had obtained after fusing with the Snakebone Fear Ghost. Even if he was separated from the Snakebone Fear Ghost, he still would not give up the bright snake divine connections power. Then this power would directly explode him into pieces that filled the sky. There was only 1 minute left. Han Chi simply reserved 1/5 of the spiritual power in his body. The rest of the spiritual power was poured into the demon lizard Fong blade. Han Chi placed the demon lizard Fong blade at his waist. He spun it 3 times. The 3 indiscriminate attacks directly killed these Valkyries. However, Han Chi did not know that during his battle with the Valkyries, many people were watching. The gazes of everyone watching the battle were focused on the Fae that Black had just summoned. The Lian God had an extreme pursuit of beauty. In the Lian God's heart, the most beautiful and the most adorable, it was those fairy source-type life forms. Thus, the Lian God had been working to make fairy source-type life forms into dolls. She hung them on the windmill in front of her palace. But at this moment, the Lian God felt that, no matter how many fairy source-type life forms there were, they could not compare to the one by Black's side. A butterfly that flew high in the sky. This butterfly was purple in color, and there were many layers of purple. Thousands of purple colors gathered on this butterfly's body. It was as if one could see all the colors in the world with one glance. This butterfly was willing to fly in the sky. It made people involuntarily feel that this was the luck of the heavens. The Fae's beauty was extreme. It was probably the appearance of this purple butterfly. As the purple wings flapped, sparkling scales sprinkled down. It was beautiful to the soul. Those who follow Black on Starweb knew that he had the legendary Fae, the blue flash purple butterfly. However, the blue flash purple butterfly's appearance was far from this purple butterfly's. If the blue flash purple butterfly was compared to a cobblestone, then this purple butterfly was like a glass-type imperial purple jade. However, this purple butterfly was somewhat similar to the blue flash purple butterfly that Black had summoned. This purple butterfly must have evolved from the blue flash purple butterfly. After Lin Yuan summoned Zi Xiao, he gave her an order. Purple Cloud, use Silent Scale Powder, and use 2 exclusive skills at the same time. After Purple Firmament heard Lin Yuan's order, it flew toward Han Chi. All the Starweb viewers couldn't help but hold their breaths as their hearts tensed up. Although Black was Hui Yao's hero, all the Starweb viewers could not help but want to curse Black fiercely. Why did you send such a beautiful little butterfly to fight? However, at that moment, the Radiance Federation's 13 High Lords, the Freedom Federation's High Lord, the Compassion Goddess, Li Su, had arrived. Second Page Revival was hidden in the team. Lan Sun, who was in the Azure Federation, narrowed his eyes. They all thought of a legend. They didn't expect this legend to be true. It seemed that there was no suspense in this battle. At that moment, the Starweb viewers only saw this beautiful purple butterfly. The moment the Valkyrie's phantom disappeared, it flapped its wings toward Han Chi and sprinkled beautiful pinkish-purple scales. 7017K. Chapter 1721. The light reflected by the pinkish-purple scale powder shone on the 5,000 square meter execution platform. It enveloped 10% of the purple light. The purple light was dreamy, and all the audience could not help but be mesmerized. It was as though their hearts and souls were being attracted by this pinkish-purple color and could not escape. Purple Sky's ability was Silent Scale Powder. It could release an adhesive scale powder with a silence effect. The target that came into contact with the scale powder would not be able to communicate with Spirit Chi to release abilities. At the same time, the target would also absorb the opponent's Spirit Chi. Under the effect of Spirit Chi, the scale powder would absorb Spirit Chi to multiply. This ability did not have much effect on Han Chi at the moment. Han Chi did not need to release the ability now. He only needed to use the energy contained in his body to slash the class demon lizard Fong blade. Lin Yuan did not point to Purple Sky using the Silent Scale Powder to harm Han Chi. Purple Sky's main killer move was not the exclusive skill Scale Powder Halo. Scale Powder Halo reflected strong light through its own scale powder. causing the target to suffer optical pollution. It caused dizziness and temporary blindness, which was a kind of group control. Han Chi was now in a state of dizziness and blindness. He could casually slash the demon lizard Fong blade and attack the surroundings indiscriminately. It allowed the concentrated attacks to have a defensive effect during the period of blindness. In fact, Lin Yuan could summon Purple Sky because of the exclusive skill Mind-Soul Beauty Goddess that it had obtained when summoning a fantasy breed. Purple Sky itself was a kind of extremely beautiful fae that was appreciated by the world. Purple Sky could use the spirit and soul power contained in its body. It used spirit and soul power as a catalyst. It magnified beauty to an unlimited extent. It created a charm and attraction effect on the target, causing the target to enter a state of affection. The target that entered a state of affection would instinctively want to keep everything from Purple Sky's main body on its body forever. The target that was in a state of affection would feel proud of collecting Purple Sky's main body's things. The middle-rank demon that Han Chi had just contracted had used a charm method to seduce Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan decided to give it a taste of its own medicine. He would let the Freedom Federation's unique demon know. In terms of charm, you demons are just the younger brother. Under the scale powder, Han Chi, who was clearly blinded, attacked the surroundings indiscriminately. He breathed in the scale powder that Purple Sky had sprinkled. It was as though the scale powder that Purple Sky sprinkled was Han Chi's most beloved object. A large amount of scale powder was absorbed into Han Chi's body. The devil hidden in Han Chi's body and fused with him was naturally affected as well. The affected devils resisted for a short while. He subconsciously fought with Han Chi for the scale powder that he absorbed into his body. A large amount of scale powder gathered in the body of the Snakebone demon. As a result, Snakebone Fear of Ghosts lost the ability to activate the spiritual energy within its body and unleash its skills. Without waiting for the intoxicated Han Chi to react, Yi Qingtang's eyes lit up. Han Chi's body, which had fused with the Snakebone and the ghost, instantly swelled up in the purple mist and exploded into pieces. And from Han Chi's body, a body covered in sharp bone spikes fell down. The snake's sharp tail rose high in the air. The end of the tail pierced through the throat and strangled the strange life form. This life form had a timid expression on its face, but under his cowardice, his eyes were filled with sinister schemes. The aura of depravity on his body made people feel very uncomfortable. This strange and terrifying creature was precisely the Snakebone Fear Ghost that had suffered heavy injuries due to the energy explosion in Han Chi's body. According to normal circumstances, Han Chi's death would not have happened. At this moment, Snakebones was afraid of ghosts, so he should not be breathing. However, the Snakebone Fear Ghost did not seem to be affected at all. Li Su immediately knew that this was a devil produced by the Freedom Federation's Devil Cathedral. It would not be like a bloodline of desolation fae, which would disappear with the death of the contractor. Instead, it could survive independently. Of course, Lin Yuan could not jump to a conclusion without careful research on this Snakebone coward. This Snakebone Fear Ghost wanted to escape, but it was bound by the quicksand vortex that suddenly appeared. At that moment, Li Su could finally see the devil's true data. With a glance, Li Su realized something. The devil's data was different from Faye's. The devil's abilities and exclusive skills could only be activated and used after fusing with a spirit chi professional. This made the devil look like a kind of companion life form. Furthermore, Han Chi had fused with this Snakebone Fear Ghost earlier, and its strength had increased by a huge margin. That was why its physical body had reached the level of a myth breed fae. It was enough to withstand the power of a pinnacle myth too. It could be said that the devil could be called the most outstanding kind of possession life form, putting aside the fact that this devil was already seriously injured. Even if it was not seriously injured, it would still be able to wrestle with the Diamond X/Fantasy V Source Sand. It might not be able to defeat the Source Sand. After all, the Source Sand had always been nurtured by Lin Yuan in the best way. When Li Su had turned the Source Sand into a cage, to capture the snake-bone fear ghost. This general execution duel was because the main general had died. It was completely over. As for the two independent 100 sequence members who had ascended the general execution stage, before Han Chi, when they had no choice but to attack, they had already died on the general execution stage. After ascending the general execution stage, they had not been able to unleash their strength. However, they had been killed by their own people. No matter how one looked at it, it was full of irony. At that moment, the Starweb audience was in a complete uproar. In this duel, Lin Yuan might not have displayed his full strength. However, this duel could definitely be called an evenly matched duel. This general execution duel would be decided in one duel. The duel lasted for nearly 20 minutes. It allowed all the Radiance Federation citizens to know how the top spirit chi professionals of the younger generation fought. Horizon Maple Leaf. Black is too strong. What kind of duel is this? Why do I feel that such a duel is beyond my understanding? Black is probably stronger than the top 10 of the 100 sequence. Memories in the Wind. Hee. I'm from the Myriad Generals Pavilion, a top faction. Based on my understanding of the 100 sequence, I'm afraid that apart from His Majesty's disciples, Lu Jie and Xia Qing, no one else has the ability to fight against Black. Light of Tomorrow. Black Bullpen. After being a fan of Black for so long, Black has once again become the hero of the Radiance Federation. Purple Star. This time, the people that the Freedom Federation sent were killed by Black. There won't be any conflict, right? Past Black. Do you think that the purple-haired youth that Black killed on the Freedom Federation side did not have the intention to kill? If it wasn't for Black's strength and its unexpected resistance to poison, Black would have been dead after being bitten by that little blue snake. The spectators on Starweb were constantly discussing. The entire Starweb was in an excited and uplifting mood. It was because of a youth wearing a silver mask. The Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation had collided, and the Radiance Federation had won. 7,017K. Chapter 1722. It was different from the cheers and excitement on Starweb. The candidates and the Radiance 100 sequence members were surprised by Black's strength. They were proud of him. But now, everyone was holding their breath nervously. After the general execution battle, the team battle would be held soon. The examinees and the members of the Liberal 100 sequence present were the clearest about their own abilities, especially the Radiance 100 sequence members who had just been selected, the 91st to the 100th. For example, Li Nao and Zhang Ziheo could be 100% sure. If the two of them went up, they would definitely be like the two independent 100 sequence members. Even if they were affected by the battle's aftermath, they would lose their lives. Han Chi was using the demon lizard Fong Blade the entire time on the general execution stage, under Black's restriction of only being able to use one precious treasure. Black chose to use an artifact to protect the two Radiance 100 sequence members who were on the stage. Black was really gentle. Black was standing on the general execution stage. There were two new suns above his head. The shadow of a woman whose entire body was fiery red was holding a phoenix neck peep in her hand and standing beside Black. The purple butterfly that had bewitched all the audience landed on the silver mask on Blackie's forehead. Before that, purple snake-shaped devil was completely controlled and bound. Even if there was a trace of danger, Black did not release the two Radiance 100 sequence members. Such a Black could be called a true leader of the Radiance 100's younger generation. Even compared to the Radiance envoy, Lu Yifan, he was not inferior and equally dazzling. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan in surprise. The strength that Lin Yuan had displayed was beyond the Moon Empress' imagination. The Moon Empress had always known that Lin Yuan was very strong. However, she did not expect him to be so strong. She had only become Lin Yuan's master for less than a year. When Lin Yuan had become her master, he had still been a rookie who could not resist a platinum fae. But now, after a few months of growth, Lin Yuan was already standing at the peak of the Radiance 100's younger generation. Or rather, it was not just Radiance. In the entire Origin world, Lin Yuan was an absolutely dazzling existence. It was hard to look away from his dazzling brilliance. The Moon Empress could feel that the other 12 excellencies were looking at her in surprise. They were probably thinking about how she nurtured her disciples. The Moon Empress actually had many ideas on how to nurture Lin Yuan. But the Moon Empress realized something. Lin Yuan did not like receiving his help. In other words, he had always been self-sufficient as a creation master. Not only did the Moon Empress not want to investigate all of this, but she also didn't want to. He had always wanted to help Lin Yuan hide. However, it was precisely because of this that the Moon Empress felt that Lin Yuan was a prodigy. To put it bluntly, even if he didn't become Lin Yuan's teacher, he wouldn't be able to do so. As long as Lin Yuan didn't cause any trouble in the early stages and was targeted by others, he wouldn't be able to escape. He had a certain amount of time to develop and accumulate. If Lin Yuan wanted to, he was still qualified to take a step forward. By becoming a Radiance 100 sequence member, he would fight for the position of a Radiance Envoy 2 years later. At that moment, the Moon Empress' eyes slowly turned from shock to pride and honor. On the Azure Federation side, Lan Sun frowned several times. Lan Sun frowned. This had nothing to do with Black. It was all because of Yin Lin. Lan Sun could see that Yin Lin was very nervous about Black the whole time. When Black was attacked, Yin Lin would feel uneasy and angry. When Black gained an advantage, Yin Lin would be excited and happy. It could be said that Black's situation in the arena completely controlled Yin Lin's emotions. This was something that Lan Sun could not understand. Then, Lan Sun had an idea. He suddenly recalled the relationship between Yin Lin and the Moon Empress disciple, Lin Yuan. Starting from the Radiance Federation, Yin Lin had only been moved by these two people. Lan Sun took a few glances at the Moon Empress and thought to himself, Black should be the same person as Lin Yuan. If that was the case, then when the Freedom Federation was targeting the Radiance Federation would not be able to survive. The Radiance Federation had also set up a huge trap for the Freedom Federation, if his guess was correct. As an Azure Envoy, Yin Lin had already joined the fray. For the Radiance sect, he had ruthlessly cheated the Freedom Federation. Thinking of this, Lan Sun sighed. He seemed to have predicted that after the team battle, both the Radiance and Freedom Federation would be defeated. A conflict was bound to break out. He only hoped that when the time came, the Azure Federation would not be dragged into this. However, seeing Yin Lin's current state, was it really possible? On the Freedom Federation's side, Li Yi frowned. It could be said that the current situation was completely out of Li Yi's expectations. Under normal circumstances, Han Shi should not have appeared in the Independent 100 sequence. It was for this plan that Li Yi had asked Du Miao to arrange a seat for Han Shi in the Independent 100 sequence a year in advance. Otherwise, given Han Shi's situation, there was no need for him to become a member of the Independent 100 sequence. Du Miao had not publicly accepted Han Shi as a disciple. However, he had secretly taught Han Shi for more than 5 years. Han Shi was Li Yi, who had informed Du Miao of his plan. He had borrowed it from Du Miao. Now that Han Shi was dead, Li Yi felt that when he returned to the Freedom Federation, he really had no way to explain to Du Miao. Du Miao would probably go crazy if his 5 years of hard work went to waste. After Han Shi died, Lian Shun's face did not have a trace of other expression. It was as if the one who died was not the Freedom Federation's prodigy. Lian Shun was still reminiscing about the feeling she had felt from Black just now. The Freedom Federation's mission to the Radiance Federation was Li Yi's idea, and it had nothing to do with her. Lian Shun's purpose for coming here was to ensure Qian Yu's safety. At the same time, Lian Shun had another plan in mind. That was if it was possible. Lian Shun planned to take Black away from the Radiance Federation. Then, she would properly check Black inside and out. She would see what Black was relying on to make her feel a trace of palpitation. Qian Yu's face was gloomy. On the Radiance Federation's side, Black's strength was simply too astonishing. After a duel, even Qian Yu, who was a Freedom Envoy, was unable to completely see Black's depths. It was an attack from the 8 cattails. Qian Yu could not help but tremble in fear. It was a known fact that this attack was not unleashed by a Fae. It was used by Black through the Fae's ability. The power was at least 30% weaker. Yanling, Kaihua, and Yuchangjian. There was even a hint of delight on his face. Han Qi was the same age as the trio and was in a competitive relationship with them. In the future, they would definitely compete for the position of Freedom Envoy and Freedom Knight. Now, there was one less opponent. This reduced a lot of pressure on the trio. On the Freedom Federation side, there was a sorrowful look on their faces. Only that young man with short white hair remained. At that moment, Lin Yuan, who was on the general execution platform, suddenly realized something. The snake-bone fear ghost, which was bound by him, had changed. 7017K. Chapter 1723. Originally, Snakebone's timid ghost was only seriously injured. The source sand wrapped around Snakebone's timid ghost's wrist and ankles and extracted chain swords. These 8 chain swords, which were made of radium-uranium steel, completely locked Snakebone's timid ghost in place. However, in less than 3 minutes, Li Tianlan's expression changed. Snakebone's timid ghost suddenly leaked a large amount of vitality for unknown reasons. Lin Yuan did not use the source sand to attack Snakebone's timid ghost, but it died under the source sand's restraint. Lin Yuan's plan to capture a middle-rank demon alive completely failed. The dead Snakebone's timid ghost's body gradually turned into an eye-like black crystal. The moment the black crystal appeared, Lin Fan's eyes widened. Yanling, Kaihua, and Yuchangjian looked at this black crystal with greedy eyes. This eye-like black crystal was very important to the 3 of them. On the battlefield, Han Qi had been the defeated party. Everything that Han Qi and the 2 Liberal 100 sequence members had been controlled by Lin Yuan, who was the victor. Everything had been controlled by Lin Yuan, who was the victor. Previously, when Lin Yuan had been training in the Dimensional Rift, the source sand would spontaneously help Lin Yuan collect the spoils of war. After losing the control of the floating earth serpent, the source sand became active. It devoured all the spoils of war on the battlefield and put them into the guard sand. At that moment, the guard sand's palm was holding 3 pieces of spatial equipment. The Class 5 Demon Lizard Fong Blade, the Class 4 Snake Arm Guard, and the Class 4 Terror Serpent Ring. There was also the Class 3 Sacred Source Life Form. The oath encircling the snake worlds remains. Any one of these items could be considered a huge fortune, especially the 2 Class 4 artifacts and 1 Class 5 artifact. Such resources could already be considered a Federation's foundational resources. A Class 5 Creation Master would need more than a month to refine a Class 4 artifact. A Class 5 artifact would need nearly 2 months to refine. The 3 artifacts did not include the Sacred Source Lifeform's body. They would need to occupy a Class 5 Creation Master's body for nearly 4 months. Lin Yuan took out a diamond face storage box that he had never used before in front of the Freedom Federation's envoys. He stored all these items in the diamond face storage box. Then he walked off the stage. Other than Luo, the Freedom Federation's envoys, no one mourned Han Qi's death, but the younger generation, including Qian Yu, all gritted their teeth and looked at Black. He wished he could break Black's bones and drain Black's blood. Lin Yuan ignored these gazes and calmly walked down the general execution stage. The moment Lin Yuan walked off the general execution platform, cheers rang out on Star Web and in the real world. And he, Zhongzhe, Gulang, Lu Jie, and Gao Feng all knew that Lin Yuan was Black. Among these people, and he and Zhongzhe were the most shocked. Both of them had fought with Lin Yuan before. The strength that Lin Yuan had displayed in this battle was the same as the battle against Zhongzhe at the Nyx Assembly. Moreover, the trump card he used in the battle with Anha on the island was completely different. When Lin Yuan had fought against Zhongzhe, he had used the Jackdaw's Withering Strike to establish his victory. When he was fighting he still used the Jackdaw's Withering Strike. Later, when he had helped the Mother of Bloodbath awaken its favored spirit bloodline, he had executed the Whale Sea Leaping Wave Strike. The Whale Sea Leaping Wave Strike made he think that this was Lin Yuan's full strength. On the sea, Lin Yuan had executed the Whale Sea Leaping Wave Strike with the advantage of the geographical environment. It was enough to contend with a myth 3 Fae. At that time, and he had already been convinced by Lin Yuan after he had executed the whale sea-leaping wave strike. However, Lin Yuan was also holding this sacred sword. He had executed a sword skill that Zhong Zhe and he had never seen before. Both of them suddenly felt that even if they had improved, if they fought again, they would not be Lin Yuan's match. Their improvement in strength was also related to Lin Yuan. If not for that heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearl containing the goddess Gossamer. Zhong Zhe's desolation bloodline Fae, the burning sky centipede, could not purify its bloodline and master the top-notch red plum meteorite fire. Without the nearly 1,000 heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls that Lin Yuan had given, and he could not have allowed the mountain-suppressing centipede and the awakening hibernation earth dragon to purify and mutate one's bloodline. Seeing Lin Yuan walk back to the team, Lu Jie subconsciously took 2 steps forward and stood beside Lin Yuan. Lu Yifan gave Lin Yuan a thumbs up. This scene was seen by the Starweb audience. It was equivalent to Black obtaining the Radiance Envoy's affirmation. Those who have been guessing what kind of phase Black had on Starweb. After this battle, the nervousness in their hearts dissipated. They kept posting and discussing the phase that Black had revealed. Lu Shuang's live-streaming room exploded again after 8 tails appeared behind Black. However, as a Pinnacle King-class expert, Lu Shuang did not keep commentating like before in order to collect traffic. Lu Shuang silently prayed in her heart. In this general execution battle, the enmity between the Radiance Federation and the Freedom Federation was completely formed. The team battle would undoubtedly be much more tragic than the general execution battle. The duel between the two sides would probably only stop when one side was completely annihilated. At this moment, there was a group of people in black armor, all of them wearing copper masks on their faces. The masks were engraved with numbers. This group of people had a total of 12 people. Just as they were about to reach the Radiance Federation, they encountered 4 carriages. These 4 carriages were very strange. The 4 carriages were not pulled by the 4 different colored stone horses in front of the carriages. These 4 different colored stone horses were lifted by 4 groups of ascetics who were suffering from different hardships. These ascetics who were suffering from hardships were pulling the carriages forward at a fast speed. Each carriage hit a powerful and obscure aura. At that moment, the small group of people wearing copper masks intercepted the 4 carriages. The leader of the small group said in a cold voice, "The 4 horsemen under Ta, Dian, Ingzhu, and Second Page. Death riding on the green horse, famine riding on the black horse, war riding on the red horse, and plague riding on the white horse. After 1,000 years, we meet again. Are you guys also going to the Radiance Continent?" After being intercepted, the ascetics who were pulling the carriages stopped in their tracks. The ascetics who were pulling the green carriages were all dead. They had turned into soul-burning undead creatures. These undead creatures' bodies were deathly pale, and their clothes were ragged. It was unknown how many disasters they had suffered when they were alive. It was such a group of people who were pulling the palace-like green carriages. The ascetics who were pulling the black carriages were all as thin as a match. The ascetics who were 8 meters tall were definitely not more than 25 kilograms. Their skin was wrapped around their bones like an iron cage covered by a cloth. The ascetics who were pulling the red carriages were all well-built. However, each of them had injuries from the war. Fresh blood kept flowing out of the ascetics' wounds. 7,017K. Chapter 1724. As for the holy white carriage, the ascetics pulling it were all infected with the plague. Their bodies were covered with pustules, and they kept vomiting. The plague miasma surrounded the ascetics. It corroded the air and made sizzling sounds. At that moment, the door of the red carriage was opened from the inside. A red sarcophagus was pushed out of the carriage by some unknown force. After the red sarcophagus appeared, the sarcophagus cracked. After the battle 3,000 years ago, the Tower Cannon and the Epic Temple signed an agreement. The Tower Cannon's 8th page closed the world for 3,000 years. Our Tower Cannon did it. On the other hand, your Epic Temple couldn't find that so-called sage for 3,000 years. You've been hindering our tower cannon's plan." Upon hearing that, the figure wearing the copper mask who spoke just now heard it. He took off his mask and took a deep breath. He spat in the direction of the red sarcophagus. A force that could split the sea by 1,000 meters crashed into the red sarcophagus. A muffled sound was heard. The tower cannon has done a lot of tricks in the past 3,000 years. The four of you have endured for 3,000 years, and your powers shouldn't have fully recovered. At your peak, our small team couldn't take down the four of you. But now, I alone can capture the four of you. We have to investigate something in the Radiance continent. Before we finish, the people of the tower cannon are not allowed to step in. Otherwise, I won't spit out level 5 mutated water next time, but level 6 mutated water. After saying that, the man put the copper mask on his face again. The figure in the red sarcophagus didn't say anything. At that moment, the door of the white carriage opened. The white sarcophagus was pushed out by an unknown force. A feminine voice rang out. "In that case, the four of us will go back first. But the tower cannon and the epic temple will remember this debt." The figure wearing the copper mask heard that. "The debts of the epic temple and the pagoda cannon are endless. If we really want to settle the debt, it'll be the 4 temple attendants who will settle it with you 8 pages. It's not up to me, Chio 21, to settle it with you. If it wasn't me leading the team this time, but Lord Chio Fun, you won't be able to escape this time." The ascetics pulling the cart crawled around after receiving the order. Finally, with great difficulty, he straightened his tormented body. He dragged the 4 carriages and headed in the opposite direction of the Radiance continent. The young man standing behind Lianshan was stunned by the scene. The purple flame of the black candle in his eyes flickered slightly. Then, the expression on his face relaxed. It was as if he didn't care about any of this at all. When Chio 21 led the team and was about to enter the Radiance continent, he suddenly seemed to have received some kind of command. A look of disbelief appeared on his face. Chio 21 said to the 11 bronze masked figures behind him, "Lore Hall attendant wants us to return to the shrine. It said that the totem in the shrine has evolved." Hearing that, although the other 11 figures were all wearing masks, they didn't dare to make a move. However, at that moment, those people all revealed joyous and excited expressions. Then, the 12 figures flew toward the epic sacred hall at a speed even faster than when they had arrived. Inside the temple, 4 attendants were kneeling on the ground. They raised their heads and stared at the totem in the hall without blinking. Originally, there was only the totem god on the totem. There was also a Lord Sage who was above the Lord Totem and had his hand in the center of the totem god. But at this moment, a totem in the shape of a cat with 8 tails had appeared beside the sage. There was a bird-shaped totem with a corona on its head, a bone lotus totem, and a butterfly-shaped totem. No one knew what these 4 new totems meant. They also didn't know what these 4 totems represented. Why did they appear beside Lord Sage? However, the changes in the totems proved that Lord Totem God and Lord Sage definitely existed in this world, and some kind of change had occurred. The 4 attendants respectfully kowtowed to the 4 newly appeared totems 3 times. During the kowtowing process, no one noticed. It was unknown when Lord Sage's other hand had grasped a treasure sword that was held by a young girl. However, this sword was behind the sage's stone carving. Only when the light in the temple was the brightest could one see a trace of it. After exiting the temple, among the 4 of them, the only female voice spoke. Since Lord Totem God and Lord Sage's totems have both changed, it means that even if the epic bell is in chaos, it won't be affected. Before the main world is completely in turmoil, we should still follow the original plan and continue to wait. This female voice's suggestion was obviously approved by the other 3. At that moment, the female voice continued. "The totems have already changed. There is no need for the 4 of us to continue to sleep. The power accumulated in these 3,000 years should now be completely absorbed into Lord Totem God's body." After saying that, the female directly returned to her temple. The excess power accumulated in her body for many years. In the process of kowtowing, it was transmitted into Lord Totem God's totem. The other 3, one in front and one behind. They all made the same choice. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly felt that his wrist was unusually hot. At that moment, Morbius' voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yuan's mind. Partner, I don't know why, but there's a sudden surge of huge power in my body. This power has all been transformed into the power source and stored. From now on, as long as there are no special circumstances, I should not fall into a deep sleep again. Furthermore, I can squander this source energy. My power source could do many things. Hearing that, Lin Yuan felt a little strange. Lin Yuan had always thought of Morbius as a kind of fae. Lin Yuan had never heard of a fae's body, an example of a sudden surge of huge power. However, since this was beneficial to Morbius, Lin Yuan did not think too much about it. He planned to return to the Return from Faraway Manor after this team battle, and then have a good chat with Morbius. Lu Wensheng, who was originally in charge of this duel, stood up again and said, "In the first general execution battle, the Freedom Federation's main general is dead. The Radiance Federation's side wins. Next, let's start the team battle. I wonder how the Freedom Federation wants to compete in the team battle? According to the rules of the 10,000 Nations Conference, the losing side of the general execution battle would decide how many people to enter the team battle. As for the rules of the team battle, it will be decided by the winning side. It could be said that Lin Yuan's slaughter battle had given the Radiance Federation an advantage in the team battle." Chapter 1725. When Qian Yu heard Lu Wensheng's words, his expression darkened. Qian Yu glanced at the masked black with a fearful expression. Qian Yu finally knew that there were tough bones in the Radiance 100 sequence. It was the same as the situation on his side. Han Qi's strength definitely could not compare to Lu O. Han Qi was merely a disciple that His Holiness Du Miao had yet to accept. Furthermore, His Majesty Du Miao had many people that he cared for, and his resources were distributed to too many people. Thus, no matter how one looked at it, even if Han Qi was accepted as a disciple by His Holiness Du Miao, he was still the one with the lowest status among all the disciples of His Holiness. But Luo was taken in as a disciple by Her Highness Na when he was young. Moreover, there were rumors that Luo was the son of Her Highness Na. Nana doted on Luo a lot. Han Qi only had 3 treasured weapons on him. However, if Luo were to take out all the treasures he had on him, he would have more than 10. After all, Her Majesty Na was the leader of the Freedom Federation. He was the most qualified to be called God. At the same time, Nana was also a Class 5 Creation Master. Qian Yu and Lu O had known each other for 6 to 7 years. Qian Yu had always been envious of Lu O's resources. Moreover, the devil that Lu O contracted wasn't a middle-ranked devil like them. Instead, it was a superior great devil. Qian Yu wasn't sure about the Radiance Federation side. Were there any other hard bones hiding? The strongest people on his side were Lu O, Yin Ling, Kai Hua, Yu Changjian, and Qian Yu. Since he was the one who had confirmed the number of players on his side, Qian Yu naturally set the number of people to be 5. This was the most advantageous number for their side. Originally, Qian Yu had the thought of killing all the Radiance 100 sequence members. But now, the battle between Black and Han Qi. This caused Qian Yu to lose a portion of his sharpness and become more cautious. The leader, Qian Yu, did not discuss with the others. He said directly, "Our side's rule is that the number of people going up is 5. As the victor of the general execution battle, the Radiance faction has raised 3 requests. Our Freedom Federation needs the right to deny it." After Qian Yu expressed his stance, Lu Wensheng, who was Hui Yao's holiness, did not say anything else. Lu Yifan said, "Out of the 3 restrictions, the Freedom Federation can remove one of them. This is your right. I don't need you to remind me about this." Lu Yifan turned around and looked at Zhongzhe, Lu Jie, and Gao Feng. Finally, his gaze landed on Lin Yuan. Clearly, the Freedom Federation had limited the number of participants to 5. As the leader, Lu Yifan had already chosen the person he wanted to go on stage. However, he was different from the Freedom Envoy, Qian Yu. As the captain, Lu Yifan was willing to listen to the opinions of his teammates, after knowing that they didn't need to go on stage. At the same time, Li Nao, Zhang Zihao, and the others felt relieved. He was also worried about Lu Yifan, Black, and the others. At that moment, Lin Yuan had released the two Radiance 100 sequence members in the treasure cave, Golden Toad. After the two of them were summoned out of the treasure cave, Golden Toad, Lin Yuan's eyes lit up. He glanced at the arena. Then, with an excited expression, he bowed toward Lin Yuan. After the two Radiance 100 sequence members were stuffed into the treasured artifacts made from the treasured cave, Golden Toad skin and stomach pouch, they had already died. Thus, he had been worrying about the situation on the field. He was afraid that Black would not be able to fight 1 against 3. Since Black was still alive, it meant that he had won the duel. The two Radiance 100 sequence members bowed toward Black to thank him for saving their lives. Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said to Lu Yifan, "Our first request is that no one uses artifacts." Currently, the only artifact that Lin Yuan was familiar with was the treasure cave Golden Toad brocade pouch, which was useless in battle. The treasure cave Golden Toad brocade pouch was the only artifact that Lin Yuan was proficient in using, and it was useless in battle. Although Lin Yuan did not know Lu Yifan, he knew Zhongzhe, Lu Jie, and Gao Feng. After all, the Radiant Sex Education method was after the face system was completely formed. Then, according to the characteristics of the sacred source life form, they would match artifacts. Lu Yifan was the third Radiance Envoy. As the third Radiance Envoy, Lu Yifan definitely had an artifact. He definitely had an artifact. However, with only one person using an artifact, he would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage against 5 people using artifacts. Thus, no one used an artifact. Instead, it gave his side the advantage. In the previous duel, Han Qi had used the Class 5 Demon Lizard Fang Blade. His combat strength had increased by at least 20%. Most importantly, the Class 5 Demon Lizard Fang Blade provided Han Qi with an endless supply of energy. If not for the Class 5 Demon Lizard Fang Blade, Han Qi could only rely on the floating earth snake to eat dirt. Chimey, which had already transformed, could not hold on any longer. This duel allowed Lin Yuan to deeply understand how helpful a suitable artifact was to a spirit Qi professional. Hearing Black's suggestion, Lu Yifan nodded. Then he frowned. Lu Yifan also understood. The Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation's education methods were different. Restricting artifacts was the most beneficial choice for his side. However, the Freedom Federation would definitely know about it. Then, in such a situation, the Freedom Federation had the right to remove a requirement. It was very likely that they would remove this requirement. After Lu Yifan expressed his thoughts, Yishuan said, "Lu Jie, Zhongzhe, and Gao Feng's expressions turned grave. According to Zhongzhe's personality, he would definitely say, 'So what if the opponent has an artifact? Our side is not afraid.'" However, Zhongzhe knew this duel was not just about life and death. It was about the Radiance Federation's dignity and glory. However, Zhongzhe thought for a long time and could not think of a solution to the situation that Lu Yifan had mentioned. Previously, Lin Yuan did not understand the rules of the Myriad Nations Conference. He knew that his side could make 3 requests, and the opponent could only reject 1. Behind the silver mask, a smile appeared on his face. According to Ian Lin's information, the Freedom Federation's envoy team had a trump card. One of their trump cards was the combination of Yinling, Kaihua, and Yu Changjian's sacred source life forms. Gao Feng had the sacred source life form, the music box. That way, they would not have to worry about the combination of the 3 sacred source life forms. However, the Freedom Federation's envoy team did not know about this. Compared to artifacts, the combination of 3 sacred source life forms was undoubtedly much stronger. Zhongzhe, Gao Feng, and Lu Jie had not participated in the duel. The Freedom Federation did not know much about the 3 of them. Therefore, the Freedom Federation's envoy team could not confirm whether they had a suitable artifact to use. Therefore, their second request was for no one to use a sacred source life form. The Freedom Federation's trump card was restricted. They would definitely not be willing and would not agree. 7017K. Chapter 1726. Therefore, even though he knew that this was a two-way restriction, he still chose to cross out the second requirement. Lin Yuan voiced out his thoughts. The expressions on Lu Yifan, Zhongzhe, Lu Jie, and Gao Feng's faces relaxed at the same time. Lin Yuan had used the sacred source life form to unleash a Myth 3 Fey attack on the Commander execution platform. However, as long as an offensive sacred source life form was nurtured properly, it would basically have the ability to fight above its rank. Zhongzhe's sacred source life form, the heaven's blazing fire, had already reached 5 stars. Zhongzhe used the sacred source life form's heavenly blaze to open the gates of heaven and summon the flaming angel. The leading archangel had the strength of a Myth 3. Thus, on the side of the Freedom Federation diplomatic mission, he was not afraid of Lin Yuan's sacred source life form. He gave up on denying the second request. In fact, these 2 requests from the Radiance Federation did not need to be restricted anymore. However, since there was such an opportunity, no one would be foolish enough to give it up. In the end, the 5 of them discussed. In order to ensure the safety of Gaofeng, a pure support, each team could choose 1 member. This member could not be attacked before the other 4 members fell to the ground. This kind of request was made in the 10,000 States Conference. The Federation that had pure support or healing spirit chi professionals in their team would always mention it. It was not a special request. After Lu Yifan revealed these 3 requests, Feng Qiu's expression changed. The faces of the Freedom Federation's side immediately became very interesting. After witnessing black strength, Yu Changjian, who had some complaints about the 2 disciples of His Holiness, could not help but say, "Damn it, the Radiant Sect's 2 requests are obviously restricting our performance." You all saw the Radiance 100 sequence test just now. That youth in white is Cicada Cry's disciple. It's obviously a pure support. The 3rd request has great benefits for the Radiance Federation. Based on the abilities displayed by Cicada Cry's disciple, if we keep the 3rd request, we won't be able to fight a war of attrition with Hui Yao. I might be a support-type spirit chi professional, but I'm more inclined to control and attack. At the same time, Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and I will link our sacred source life forms. I don't have to worry about my safety at all. Yu Changjian's complaints could be said to be the thoughts of Yin Ling and Kai Hua. The 2 of them wanted to agree with Yu Changjian, but when they saw the expression on Qian Yu's face, they shut their mouths. Han Yu glared at Yu Changjian and said, "Yu Changjian, this duel was ordered by His Highness Li Su. Her Holiness, the Compassionate Goddess, is watching from behind. Are you complaining because you are dissatisfied with His Majesty? In this battle, either we win or we die. This is the destiny of the 3 of you. Rather than complaining here, why don't we think about how we can win this battle?" Qian Yu's words were reasonable. It was also a fact. The vague meaning in his words was like a sharp thorn that stabbed into the hearts of Yin Ling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian. Yes, if they lost this battle, the 3 of them would definitely die. The 3 of them knew about the relationship between Her Holiness Goddess Lian and Qian Yu. He had no idea why Her Highness the Compassionate Goddess was so protective of Qian Yu. However, the Freedom Federation had previously held a life-and-death battle for the Swamp World's territory. As a freedom envoy, Qian Yu represented his family. However, he was schemed against by a few people from the other party's clan and almost died. In the end, the Pity Goddess appeared and protected Qian Yu. Even for Qian Yu, they did not hesitate to put pressure on the family that had 2 contemporary Radiant Light Knights. In the Freedom Federation, this matter had once spread among the top families. The goddess of Lian, who was not supposed to be here, had arrived. It was obvious that if Qian Yu was really in a life-threatening situation, the Compassion Goddess would also lend a hand. Since Her Majesty Na had allowed Lu O to come over, she must have given him something to protect his life. Moreover, with the relationship between Her Holiness Goddess of Pity and Her Holiness Na, it would be impossible for her to win. Her Holiness Goddess Pity probably wouldn't mind protecting Lu O. Then, he would go to Her Highness Na to exchange for a large number of fairy source-type life forms. This was also the reason why Qianyu stood out in this life and death battle between the five of them. He only said that the fate of the three of them was victory or death. At this moment, Yanling, Kai Hua, and Yu Changjian, he could not help but feel a sense of sorrow in his heart. However, this mournful emotion only appeared for a moment before it turned into a strong desire to fight. The three of them were not sure why Qianyu and Lu O had been chosen by Her Holiness Goddess Pity and Her Highness Nana. However, the other Freedom Envoys and the current Freedom Knights had been chosen by Her Holiness. It was all because they had unparalleled potential. They had also proven themselves through certain things. This team battle with the Radiance Federation was now. It was the best opportunity for them to prove themselves. If they seized this opportunity and used the Sacred Source Life Form's linkage ability, which could not be replaced by others. Basically, it was a done deal to become the next Freedom Envoy. At the very least, they could be ranked among the Freedom Knights. Moreover, if the three of them performed outstandingly, after returning to the Freedom Federation, they might have a chance to be accepted by Her Holiness as a disciple. Kai Hua, who had this thought, suddenly felt that his fear of Qianyu had disappeared. Kai Hua looked straight at Qianyu and said, "In this battle, the three of us will naturally use our full strength, even if we have to use that move. But before we go on stage, I hope that Lord Qianyu can guarantee. Show all your trump cards, even if they will damage your potential." Qianyu could not help but be furious. What was Kai Hua talking about? Her Holiness Goddess Pity and Her Holiness Li Su were watching from behind. In the middle of a battle, how could he possibly hide anything? If Kai Hua's words were to be heard by the Freedom Federation's families and Her Holiness, if the Freedom Federation's families and Her Holiness heard this, what would he become? Especially his family, which was on bad terms with several other families. If those families heard this, they would definitely use this as an excuse. Qianyu coldly said to Kai Hua, "Kai Hua, be clear about your position. Why do you have to speak to me like this? As a Freedom Envoy, what do I need to guarantee you?" After saying that, Qianyu coldly glanced at Yan Ling and Yu Changjian. He then spoke to Lu Yifan in a clear voice. The Freedom Federation has chosen to invalidate the Radiance Federation's second request. Both sides can use the Sacred Source Life Form. Qianyu's words made Lu Yifan, Lin Yuan, Zhong Zhe, Gao Feng, and Lu Jie completely relax. Lu Jie placed his hand on his chest. In this battle, Lu Jie clearly stated that his duty was to protect. In order to protect Lin Yuan, no matter the price, his Sacred Source Life Form should also be humming. He just hoped that after he used it, Lin Yuan would not blame him. 7,017K.